Chapter 1754. Yi Yuan had fallen into despair when he found out that the temple and hall of books were involved. He had truly fallen into despair. These two forces were definitely not something they could go against. Not to mention them, even if the three great clans joined forces, they wouldn't be able to go against one of them. Annihilation. He knew that his Yi clan might be annihilated. Yi He and Yi Lin were stunned when they heard Yi Yuan's words. What's going on? Both of them were in a daze. Yi Xian helped Yi Yuan up and smiled. Father promised to protect your Yi clan, so your Yi clan will be fine. Actually, after spending time with Yi Yuan, he realized that Yi Yuan was really a good person. He was a good person indeed. Moreover, he realized that the people that his father befriended were all good people. For example, Xianxia, swordsman from the Sword Alliance, and Yi Yuan. Yi Yuan smiled bitterly. Young master, the temple and hall of books? Yi Xian said, I'll do it. Yi Yuan was stunned when he heard that. Yi Xian smiled, I'll do it. Yi Yuan said solemnly, Young master, I don't mean to look down on you and the sword master, but do you know how terrifying the temple and hall of books are? Yi Xian smiled, Do you have any other way besides trusting me? Yi Yuan fell silent. He really didn't have any other way. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent someone to look for the green shirt sword master. Meanwhile, Ling Chu suddenly said, Big brother Yi Xian, can I break through now? Yi Xian looked at Ling Chu, and Ling Chu giggled, I can't hold it in any longer. Yi Xian smiled, If you want to break through, then break through. Hearing this, Ling Chu was extremely excited. Really? Yi Xian nodded, Really? Ling Chu giggled, and then she transformed into a ray of white light that appeared on the surface of a nearby lake. In the next moment, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from her body. Bang! In an instant, the entire lake started to boil. He had to enter godly trance. As the spirit stopped suppressing it, a powerful wave of spiritual energy suddenly spread throughout the small pot. In the end, the small pot could no longer suppress the spiritual energy, so the spiritual energy spread outside. Outside the great wall of Sky Mountain, all the demon beasts turned to look in the direction of Yi Xian and the others. Above the great wall, the experts of the Shao clan and the Yuan clan also turned to look in the direction of Yi Xian and the others, their eyes filled with shock. Boom! Right at this moment, a white dragon suddenly soared into the sky, soaring across the horizon. And with the appearance of this white dragon, the spiritual energy of the entire primordial realm actually increased at an alarming rate. God! Yuan Qiu stopped and looked at the white dragon in the distance, his eyes filled with disbelief. This, not only Yuan Qiu, all the people and beasts were shocked. Behind the group of beasts, He Mu looked at the white dragon and said softly, Is it about to break through? At this moment, both the primordial realm and the beast demon race stopped. All eyes were on the white dragon. This white dragon was going to enter the immortal realm. Once it entered the immortal realm, the white dragon would undergo earth-shattering changes. God-level spring of eternal life. This level of the spring of eternal life was extremely rare in this vast universe. One had to know that even the temple and the hall of books did not have this level of spring of eternal life. At this moment, Yi Xian, Yi Yuan, and the others appeared below the white dragon. Yi Yuan's expression was extremely solemn. He knew that after today, the Yi clan would either be destroyed or completely rise. If they could defend, they would rise. If they could not, the Yi clan would completely disappear from the world. At this moment, He Mu suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, It seems like young Master Yi has still decided to interfere with the Yi clan's affairs. Yi Xian smiled and said, It's not me who decided to interfere with the Yi clan's affairs. It's my father who decided to interfere. He Mu blinked and said, Is there any difference between your father interfering and you interfering? Yi Xian smiled and said, Miss, the difference is too big. He Mu smiled and said, Young Master Yi, do you want to single-handedly fight against my beast demon clan, the hall of books and the temple? Yi Xian shook his head, I can't. He Mu looked at Yi Xian, Your father can? Yi Xian sighed softly, Miss He Mu, I think you are a good person. Previously you gave me a suggestion and a choice. Now, I will also give you a suggestion and a choice. Do you want to listen? He Mu smiled and said, Of course I'm willing to listen. Yi Xian smiled and said, The Yi clan is under my Yang family's protection. Don't have any ideas about them. Yang family is under his protection. When he said this, everyone was shocked. This sentence was very domineering. But who the hell was the Yang family? They had never heard of it. He Mu looked at Yi Xian and said, I have never heard of the Yang family. Yi Xian smiled and said, Just because you have never heard of it doesn't mean there is none. He Mu smiled and said, I know that Daoist is in a higher circle, but I have never heard of the Yang family. Is the Yang family too strong, beyond the circle that I know, or is the Yang family too weak? Yi Xian smiled and said, Looks like Miss He Mu is not going to give up. He Mu shook his head and said, Young Master Yi, I really don't understand why you are helping the Yi family. Is there any benefit for you? Yi Xian shook his head and said, There is no benefit. He Mu frowned and said, Then why are you? Yi Xian laughed and said, I told you. The Yi family is my Yang family's friend. He Mu looked at Yi Xian and said, But your surname is Yi. Are you an illegitimate child? Yi Xian was speechless. Now that he thought about it, he hadn't changed his surname yet. But he did not intend to change it. Yi Xian was used to it. In any case, his father didn't care, so why should he? Moreover, no matter what his surname was, wasn't he still his father's son? Or perhaps he should ask his father to change his surname to Yi. Yi Yang? Yi Xian couldn't help but laugh when he thought up to here. Meanwhile, Yuan Qiu suddenly walked over to Yi Xian and Yi Yuan. Yuan Qiu gazed at Yi Yuan and smiled bitterly. Brother Yi Yuan, you've made everyone suffer. Yi Yuan smiled and said, I dare not be dissatisfied. Yuan Qiu spoke in a low voice. Brother Yi Yuan, this will bring calamity to your Yi family. Yi Yuan nodded, and then he gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was about to speak when an old man suddenly appeared out of thin air. As soon as the old man appeared, the expressions of everyone here changed drastically. An expert that was above the paragon mundane realm. The old man glanced at the white dragon, and then he turned to look at He Mu and nodded slightly. Miss He Mu. He Mu laughed and said, So it's Hall Master Lin Hai. The Hall Master of the Book Hall. The expressions of everyone here changed when they heard this. The legendary Hall Master of the Book Hall has actually come. The Hall Master of the Book Hall is the strongest, and beneath him are the Hall Masters of the 4 halls. Lin Hai was the Hall Master of the Painting Hall. Lin Hai sized He Mu up, and then he smiled, as expected of the most monstrous genius in the history of Sin City. He Mu shook his head and smiled, You flatter me. Lin Hai smiled. Miss He Mu, are you here on behalf of Sin City or the Beast Demon race? He Mu smiled. What do you think, Hall Master Lin? Lin Hai fell silent. He Mu continued, Hall Master Lin, it's actually too early for us to be discussing all of this. Regardless of whether it's the divine rank spring of eternal life or the 12 saint rank springs of eternal life, they don't belong to us yet. The expressions of Yuan Qiu, Xiao Lin, and the others changed when they heard He Mu. Their objective wasn't just the divine rank spring of eternal life, it was their saint rank spring of eternal life as well. Lin Hai glanced at Yi Xian. Miss He Mu, you mean he's a variable? He Mu smiled. Yes. So, it's too early for us to be discussing the ownership of the spring of eternal life. Lin Hai gazed at Yi Xian. So, we have to kill him first, right? He Mu nodded. Yes. Lin Hai was about to speak when a Buddhist chant resounded abruptly, Amitabha. The expressions of everyone here became solemn once more when they heard this. The divine temple is here. As soon as he finished speaking, a monk appeared not too far away from Yi Xian. The monk had 6 scars on his head, wore a black kasaya, and had a large mole between his brows. The divine temple. Miku. Lin Hai gazed at the monk and smiled. Miku, I never expected that the Grand Elder of the Divine Temple would actually come here personally. Miku pressed his palms together. How could I underestimate the divine rank spring of eternal life? Lin Hai roared with laughter, and then he glanced at Yi Xian. Miss He Mu, Whether or not we're able to obtain the spring of eternal life depends on this person. Miku gazed at Yi Xian. Benefactor, are you overestimating your ability? Yi Xian was about to speak when Mu spoke abruptly. I wonder if the two of you have heard of the Yang clan? The Yang clan? Lin Hai frowned slightly. Never. Miku shook his head. Never. Mu gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi, it looks like I'm not ignorant. Yi Xian was about to speak when Miku spoke abruptly. Since this benefactor dares to stop us, then he definitely has the ability to. As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. Benefactor, if you have someone backing you, then you can call out now. Otherwise, I'm going to send you off from the afterlife. Yi Xian smiled. Does the divine temple act in such an overbearing manner? Miku gazed at Yi Xian. Benefactor, since you won't call out, then allow me to send you off from the afterlife. As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve. Boom! A powerful aura swept out, blasting straight at Yi Xian. At this moment, a trace of malevolence flashed in Yi Xian's eyes as he drew his sword and slashed. Boom! That aura directly shattered. Seeing this scene, Miku narrowed his eyes. Swordsman. At the side, Lin Hai suddenly laughed. This person has reached this level at such a young age, the person behind him must not be weak. Miku, I'm afraid it'll be a bit difficult for you to send him off from the afterlife. Miku glanced at Yi Xian. He's indeed not simple, but so what? Those who go against my divine temple, die. As he spoke, he was about to make his move. Yi Xian opened his palm and the sword master token appeared in his hand. Great monk, do you recognize this item? Miku glanced at the sword master token and shook his head. I don't recognize it. Don't recognize it? Yi Xian was stunned. Yi Xian waved the sword master token in his hand. Are you sure you don't recognize it? Miku looked at Yi Xian and opened his palm. Yi Xian loosened his hand and the sword master token fell into Miku's hand. After sizing it up, Miku shook his head. I don't recognize it. As he spoke, he slightly exerted force in his right hand and the sword master token directly shattered. Destroyed. Miku looked at Yi Xian. Although my divine temple doesn't dare to say that it's invincible, but in this world, it's not afraid of anyone. Come, hurry up and call for help. At the side, Lin Hai also laughed. Hurry up and call for help. The old man is already a bit impatient. I hope your father is strong enough, otherwise, the old man will be too disappointed. Mu also smiled. Young Master Yi, I also want to meet young Master Yi's father. Go ahead and call for help. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from not far behind Yi Xian. Brother. Hearing this, Yi Xian's body instantly trembled. Yi Xian slowly turned around. Not far in front of him, a woman wearing a plain dress slowly walked over. Inside the prison pagoda, Xiaota fell to the ground. It's over. P.S. I really want to be mischievous, but I'm afraid you'll scold me. I'd better keep a low profile. Chapter 1755. Yi Xian was stunned. Why was she here? This was really too sudden. The plainly dressed woman walked in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Qing, why are you here? Qing'er's right hand slowly stroked Yi Xian's cheek, and she said softly, I missed you. I missed you. Yi Xian's heart warmed slightly. He grabbed Qing'er's hand. I actually missed you very much too. But I couldn't find you. The plainly dressed woman grabbed Yi Xian's hand. She looked Yi Xian up and down, and smiled slightly. You've improved very quickly. Yi Xian hurriedly said, I can easily kill mortal severing realm experts now. The plainly dressed woman blinked. Mortal severing realm? Yi Xian asked, do you know what realm it is? The plainly dressed woman nodded. I do. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, do you think mortal severing realm experts are strong? The plainly dressed woman didn't speak. Yi Xian. At this time, Miku suddenly looked at the plainly dressed woman, and there was a trace of wariness in his eyes. Who are you? As a top expert, he could naturally sense that the plainly dressed woman was extraordinary. No, he couldn't sense the plainly dressed woman. But it was also because of this that he was serious. The plainly dressed woman didn't even look at Miku. She tightly held onto Yi Xian's hand and said softly, "Brother." At the side, Miku suddenly said fiercely, "You dare ignore this old monk?" The plainly dressed woman suddenly raised her sword. Before Miku could react, his head was directly pierced by a sword. Everyone present was stunned, and Lin Hai and Mu's expressions instantly became unprecedentedly serious. The plainly dressed woman looked at Miku, her gaze as calm as water. "Weak as an ant, what right do you have for me to ignore you?" "Not even the right to ignore her." Miku glared at the plainly dressed woman. "Who are you?" The plain-dressed woman pointed at Yi Xian. "I'm his sister. Do you have a problem with that?" Miku. Meanwhile, Mu spoke in a low voice. "You're the one who created the life and death sword technique." The plainly dressed woman looked at Mu. "What's wrong?" Mu looked at the plain-dressed woman and said, "I would like to exchange a few moves with Senior." The woman in the plain dress looked at Mu. "What kind of trash are you? Are you even worthy of asking me for advice?" Mu stared at the plain-dressed woman. "Please enlighten me." As she spoke, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from her body. Beyond the mundane realm, everyone present was slightly shocked. Mu was so young, yet he'd actually reached a level above Paragon Qin. Isn't this too terrifying? At this moment, the plainly dressed lady suddenly took a step forward. With that step, a sword glow suddenly flew out. Before anyone could react, the spot between Mu's brows was directly pierced by the sword glow. Everyone was petrified, including Na and Mu. She was petrified on the spot. "I can't even take a single move?" A wisp of disdain arose on the corners of the woman's mouth as she gazed at Mu. "Monster? Genius? There are no monsters or geniuses before me. Even if there are, they're trash." "Yi Xian." The woman turned to look at Yi Xian. "That doesn't include you, big brother." Yi Xian was slightly embarrassed. Mu stared fixedly at the woman. "Why have I never heard of you?" The woman in the plain dress glanced at Mu. "You're weak." Mu stared at her. "Don't tell me you don't know that there's always someone better out there?" The woman slowly walked over to Mu and looked him in the eye. "There's always someone better out there? There's no one besides me. There's always someone better out there?" As she spoke, a wisp of disdain arose on the corners of her mouth. "Even if all the heavens in the world were added together, would they be able to block a single strike of my sword?" Mu stared at her. "In the boundless universe, who dares to say they're invincible? You're invincible now, but it doesn't mean you'll be invincible in the future." The woman patted Mu lightly on the shoulder. "Call for reinforcements. Call for reinforcements." Everyone was speechless. The woman gazed at Mu. "Call for reinforcements." Meanwhile, the space behind Mu suddenly trembled. In the next moment, an extremely formidable aura swept out from the surroundings. Everyone looked over and saw a middle-aged man standing not too far behind Mu. The middle-aged man wore a loose robe made of beast skin. His upper body was bare, and there was a black divine dragon tattooed on his chest. The expressions of the demon kings and beast kings changed when they saw the middle-aged man, and then they hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Greetings, beast demon god." Beast demon god. Everyone here was shocked when they heard the demon kings and beast kings. The person before them was the one who'd unified the demon race and beast race. After they confirmed his identity, countless demon beasts roared furiously in unison. "Beast demon god." For a time, their voices rumbled like thunder and shook the sky. The woman's beautiful brows knit together slightly. "Noisy." As soon as she finished speaking, she flicked her sleeve. A strand of sword light swept down from the sky. In an instant, the voices of the demon beasts stopped abruptly. The heads of hundreds of thousands of demon beasts fell to the ground. Blood instantly dyed the ground red. Everyone felt as if they'd been struck by lightning when they saw this scene. After all, there were almost 100 mortals severing realm powerhouses amongst the demon beasts below. However, even those mortals severing realm powerhouses hadn't been able to block this strike, instantly killing hundreds of thousands of demon beasts with a single strike. At this moment, Yi Xian was slightly stunned. He wasn't surprised by Qing Er's strength. He was surprised by Qing Er's killing intent. Qing Er had killed hundreds of thousands of demon beasts without batting an eyelid. He hadn't even blinked once. The beast demon god looked at the woman, and for the first time, there was a trace of fear in his eyes. As for Na Mu, who was standing in front of the plain-dressed woman, his mind was completely blank. Annihilating hundreds of thousands of demon beasts with a single strike? They were annihilated just like that? Mi Ku, who hadn't died yet, was stunned as well. Instantly killing hundreds of thousands of demon beasts with a single strike. What kind of divine figure was this? Meanwhile, the beast demon god suddenly spoke in a low voice. Your Excellency, Miss Mu and I are from Sin City. Please. The woman suddenly looked at the beast demon god. In the next moment, the beast demon god's expression changed drastically, and then he suddenly smashed his fist forward. At the instant his fist blasted forward, a deafening explosion resounded. The heavens and the earth trembled in fear. This punch was truly capable of destroying the heavens and the earth. Everyone's expressions changed drastically. However, as a ray of light flashed, the punch instantly vanished without a trace. When everyone recovered from their shock, the beast demon god's head had fallen slowly to the ground. Another instant kill. Everyone in the surroundings was dumbstruck when they witnessed this scene. The Demon King and Beast King had even slumped to the ground. They knew the beast demon god's strength. Both of them were at the peak of the mortal severing realm, but their joint forces couldn't even withstand a single punch from the beast demon god. Yet at this moment, the beast demon god couldn't even withstand a single strike from this woman. How terrifying was this woman? It wasn't just the Demon King and Beast King. The fear in Mu's eyes had transformed into terror as well. She was aware of the beast demon god's strength, but she hadn't expected that the beast demon god would be instantly killed. He was instantly killed. Exactly how terrifying is this woman? Meanwhile, the woman looked at Mu. Where's Sin City? Mu hesitated for a moment and said, What do you intend to do? The woman's expression was calm. Slaughter the entire city. Slaughter the entire city. Mu was horrified when she spoke these words. She was just about to speak when Yi Yuan suddenly said, Senior, I know where it is. The woman said, Point me in a direction. Yi Yuan pointed to the right. Sin City is after a few tens of thousands of stellar regions. The woman suddenly opened her palm, and then the walk sword in her hand transformed into a ray of light that shot forward. Mu's eyes almost split apart from rage. No. The woman gazed at Mu. I'll annihilate the entire clan of anyone who dares to touch my brother. Yi Xian. Mu hurriedly looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, it's my fault. The woman suddenly said, If apologies were useful, why would we still cultivate the sword? As she spoke, she turned to look at Yi Xian. Brother, don't you think so? Yi Xian didn't speak. The woman looked at Yi Xian. If brother doesn't want to annihilate her entire clan, then I won't. Yi Xian smiled. No matter what you do, I'll support you. The woman's lips curled up slightly, and her smile was so bright that it made the heavens and earth lose their color. On the other hand, Yu Mu's face instantly turned pale. The woman suddenly looked at Lin Hai, and Lin Hai stared at her. I don't think you're really invincible. As soon as he spoke, he opened his palm, and a painting suddenly flew out. In the next moment, the painting arrived above the woman's head, and then a white light poured down and enveloped the woman. However, the woman was completely unharmed. Lin Hai's eyes were filled with disbelief. How could this be possible? The woman raised her hand and swung her sword. A ray of light pierced through Lin Hai's forehead, and he froze on the spot. Another instant kill. Everyone here looked at the woman as if they were looking at a monster. Lin Hai stared at her. Who the hell are you? Who the hell are you? The woman walked over to Lin Hai. Call for help. Lin Hai glared angrily at her. I don't believe you're really invincible. As soon as he spoke, he opened his palm, and a talisman suddenly shot into the sky. Call for help? How could there be an invincible person in this world? Absolutely not. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly turned to look at Mu. You don't have to call for help. As she spoke, she looked up into the distance. We're here. We're here. In the distance Sin Starfield, Sin City. On this day, a sword suddenly appeared in the sky above the originally peaceful city of Tian Sin. The walking sword. As soon as the sword appeared, a powerful sword aura enveloped the entire Sin City. At this moment, a furious shout suddenly resounded from the depths of Sin City. Who dares to offend my Sin City? As soon as the voice resounded, the walking sword suddenly descended. Bang! In an instant, the voice and the entire Sin City were reduced to nothingness. Slaughtering a city with a single strike. Slaughtering a city just like that. Chapter 1756. Heavenly Sin City was an extremely ancient and mysterious force, and there were at least 10 experts who had surpassed Ju Chen. And there were at least several hundred Transcendence Realm elites. At this moment, all the experts were turned into nothingness in an instant. Many people did not even know how they died. At this moment, a sword suddenly flew up from the ruins, and then it vanished into the starry sky. At this time, a mysterious aura suddenly appeared around the city of Sin. These mysterious experts in the dark were all extremely shocked. Who was the one who destroyed Sky Sin City? Who was it? Outside the great wall of Heavenly Mountain, the woman in the plain dress opened her palm and the walking Dao sword landed steadily in her hand. Seeing the walking sword, Mu looked at the plain-dressed woman in terror. You, the plainly dressed woman glanced at Mu. Your house is gone. Yi Xian was speechless. He and Mu stared at the woman in the plain dress. Their gazes seemed to be able to kill. The woman in the plain dress ignored her and turned to look at Lin Hai. Have your people arrived? Lin Hai snarled. Woman, do you really think you're invincible? The plainly dressed woman looked at the sea of trees. I also hope that I'm not invincible. Unfortunately, I'm invincible. Lin Hai roared angrily. Don't you dare act tough. Invincible? Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from the depths of the starry sky. The woman in the plain dress looked up and saw an old man walking over from the starry sky. The master of the Hall of Books, Li Mushu. This was the head of the 4 hall masters of the book hall. In the entire book hall, he was second only to the court head. Li Mushu took a step forward, and when his foot landed, he was already in front of the plain-dressed woman. Li Mushu looked at the plain-dressed woman. Are you talking about invincibility? The plain-dressed woman looked at Li Mushu. Do you have a problem? Li Mushu smiled and said, I just find it ridiculous. The walking Dao sword in the woman's hand suddenly flew out. Before Li Mushu could react, the sword pierced through his forehead. Li Mushu's smile froze. The plain-dressed woman looked at Li Mushu. Any other questions? Li Mushu looked at the plain-dressed woman in horror. Who are you? The plainly dressed woman looked at the sea of trees. Continue calling for more people. Continue calling for reinforcements. Lin Hai's expression was extremely ugly. The woman said, If you don't, then all of you can die. As she said that, she opened her palm and the walking Dao sword suddenly appeared in her palm. Lin Hai's expression changed drastically when he saw this, and he hurriedly said, I'll shout. I'm calling. The woman in a plain dress nodded slightly. Then let's call it that. Remember to call more people over. It's best if you can summon your ancestors. Summoning the ancestor. Lin Hai's expression was extremely ugly. He had no choice but to call out. He knew that the reason why the woman in front of him didn't kill him was because she wanted him to call for help. Right at this moment, an old man in a white robe suddenly appeared not far away from the woman in a plain dress. The person who had come was the court master of the Hall of Writings. He was also the strongest expert in the book hall. After the white-robed old man appeared, he immediately bowed slightly to the woman in the plain dress. Greetings, senior. The plain-dressed woman looked at the white-robed old man. How do you want to die? The white-robed old man's expression froze. He smiled bitterly and said, Senior, it was my book hall's fault this time. My book hall is willing to apologize. The plainly dressed woman shook her head. No need. As she spoke, she opened her palm, and a sword appeared in her grasp. The white-robed old man hurriedly said, "Senior, are you willing to make a bet?" The woman gazed at the white-robed old man. "A bet?" The white-robed old man spoke in a low voice. "Senior, spare my book haul if I resist a single strike of your sword." Resist a single strike. The white-robed old man felt extremely bitter in his heart when he spoke these words. When had he ever been so humble? Yet at this moment he had no choice but to be humble. This woman before him really possessed the ability to destroy the book haul. The woman gazed at the white-robed old man. "All right." The white-robed old man nodded slightly. He opened his palm, and a thick ancient book suddenly appeared in his hand. The Book of Holy Wisdom. Someone exclaimed with shock. The Book of Holy Wisdom. It was a precious treasure of the book haul. The white-robed old man gazed at the woman. "Senior, can I make the first move?" The woman nodded. "All right." The white-robed old man stared at her. "Senior, please provide me with your guidance." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly opened the Book of Holy Wisdom. In the next moment, countless golden characters flew out from within the Book of Holy Wisdom, and then countless mysterious and ancient voices instantly resounded throughout the heavens and the earth. The Book of Holy Wisdom. These were the words of an ancient saint. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings, and he frowned slightly. This Book of Holy Wisdom is really mysterious. At this moment he sensed the aura of death. The woman had a calm expression on her face, and she wasn't impatient to attack. In her opinion, it didn't matter if she attacked early or late, because she would only attack once. Meanwhile, the white-robed old man suddenly gazed at Yi Xian. The Book of Holy Wisdom determines life and death. Bang! In an instant, countless ancient characters suddenly converged into an enormous golden character, death. In the next moment, the enormous golden character for death shot directly towards the woman in a plain dress, and the ancient golden character contained countless ancient voices. As these ancient divine voices resounded, the expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed drastically. The words of the Book of Holy Wisdom were like sharp swords that struck at the heart. The words of the Book of Holy Wisdom determined life and death. The white-robed old man utilized his full strength as soon as he attacked, because he knew that he only had a single chance to attack. Some cultivators with weak willpower and Dao hearts perished on the spot, and it was even to the extent that some mortal severing realm experts were amongst them. On the other hand, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. His heart of the sword Dao had actually wavered slightly when he heard the words of those saints. It was self-denial. The words of these saints would throw the hearts of others into disorder. Yi Xian hurriedly circulated the profound energy within his body and started to suppress the words of those saints. The woman shook her head while a trace of disappointment flashed through her eyes. How gaudy! As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly slashed with her sword. Along with the sound of something tearing resounding, the entire heavens and the earth suddenly fell silent. At the same time, the words of the saints that had arrived before the woman had suddenly transformed into nothingness. Everyone in the surroundings gazed at the white-robed old man. At this moment, a ray of light had pierced through the space between the old man's brows. Another instant kill. At this moment, the entire heavens and the earth were silent to the point a falling needle could be heard. The white-robed old man gazed at the woman from afar while a trace of bewilderment could be seen in his eyes. Exactly, how strong are you? Exactly how strong? Everyone in the surroundings gazed at the woman. Just how strong was this plainly dressed woman? It wasn't just the white-robed old man who wanted to know, everyone else here wanted to know exactly how strong she was. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly opened her palm, and then the Book of Saints in the white-robed old man's hand suddenly flew into her grasp. She glanced at it and shook her head. Such words are even worthy of being called a saint? As she spoke, she intended to destroy the Book of Saints. Meanwhile, Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Qing Earth." The woman turned around to gaze at Yi Xian. "You want it?" Yi Xian nodded. The woman thought for a moment and shook her head. "It's all trash. Wait for me to find something better for you." As she spoke, she exerted a little force with her right hand, and then the Book of Saints transformed into ash. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, the white-robed old man spoke in a low voice. "Senior, those are the words of the ancient saints, yet you actually said that they're trash?" The woman glanced at the white-robed old man while a wisp of disdain arose on the corners of her mouth. "The saints." A group of ignorant fellows actually dared to assume the title of saint or god. How laughable! As she spoke, she flicked her sleeve lightly. "Since you've inherited these so-called inheritances of the saints, then you should be able to summon your ancestors. Come, summon them." The white-robed old man stared fixedly at the woman. "As you wish." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly opened his palm, and then a command token shot into the sky. Bang! An expanse of white light suddenly descended from the depths of the starry sky, and then the entire world instantly seethed with excitement. The world was shocked by the appearance of a saint. The ancestor of the book hall was once a saint. Moreover, he was a great saint. The woman raised her head to look up into the sky, and a white-haired old man had silently appeared amidst the white light. The white-haired old man's clothes were snow-white, and he emanated a dense aura of refinement. As soon as the white-haired old man appeared, he looked directly at the woman in the plain dress, and his gaze instantly became solemn. She opened her palm, and then the sword in her hand suddenly flew forward. In midair, the white-haired old man's pupils constricted, and then he pressed his fingers together and pointed forward. "World Stabilizer." His finger directly struck the ray of light from the woman. Bang! Everyone watched as the ray of light suddenly pierced through the tip of the white-haired old man's finger, and then it entered his body. Bang! The white-haired old man was instantly annihilated. Another instant annihilation. The white-robed old man's countenance turned pale as a sheet when he witnessed this scene, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. My ancestor, the great saint, was instantly annihilated just like that? The woman suddenly shook her head. How boring! As she spoke, she waved her right hand lightly, and then the dean and the ocean of trees were instantly annihilated. She turned around to look at Miku. "Call for help." Miku's expression was extremely unsightly. Meanwhile, a voice suddenly resounded, "Buddha be praised." Along with this voice resounding, an old monk suddenly appeared before the woman. The abbot of the divine temple. Miku was astounded. "Abbot, you've emerged from your closed-door cultivation?" The old monk paid no attention to Miku, and he bowed slightly to the woman instead. "Miss, can this matter be resolved peacefully?" The woman shook her head. "No." The old monk fell silent for a short moment before he sighed. "Miss, my divine temple is absolutely not a match for you, but I know that there's definitely someone in this world who can go against you." The woman gazed at the old monk. "Call for him." The old monk nodded slightly, and then he opened his palm to reveal a sword token. Both Yi Xian and Miku were stunned when they saw this sword token. Yi Xian's expression became strange because this sword token was practically identical to the sword token he possessed. The sword master's token? Miku glanced at Yi Xian. "Why does my abbot possess a sword token that's exactly the same as this fellow?" Meanwhile, the old monk opened his palm, and then the sword token suddenly transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky. A sword howl suddenly shook the heavens and the earth. A short moment later, the space in the sky suddenly split apart, and then a man in green clothes suddenly walked out from within it. The old monk was instantly extremely excited when he saw the man's true body, and he bowed deeply. "The divine temple welcomes the sword master." Yi Xian was speechless. "P.S. Tickets are here." Chapter 1757. Yi Xian was speechless when he saw the green-clothed man. He called his father over. Moreover, it's his main body. What's the divine temple trying to do? After the green-clothed man appeared, he was stunned when he saw Yi Xian and the woman in a plain dress. Why are these two fellows here as well? Yi Yuan was extremely excited and he hurriedly said, "Brother Yang." The green-clothed man glanced at Yi Yuan and smiled. "You're here as well." As he spoke, he looked at the woman in a plain dress and smiled. "So you're here as well." The woman in a plain dress glanced at the green-clothed man and didn't speak. The green-clothed man looked at Yi Xian. Kid, what did you do this time? Yi Xian was speechless, and he pointed at the old monk. Ask him. The green-clothed man looked at the old monk, and the old monk's face was filled with astonishment. Sword master, this little brother is… The green-clothed man looked at the old monk. He's my son. Son. The old monk was instantly petrified on the spot. As for Miku, he seemed as if he'd been struck by lightning, and his face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Son. Everyone present was stunned when they heard this. He asked his father to kill his son? What's going on in the divine temple? The green-clothed man looked at the old monk. Ku Su, can you explain to me? The old monk called Ku Su's expression was extremely unsightly. Meanwhile, Yi Xian spoke abruptly. Dad, let me explain to you. As he spoke, he told them everything that had happened. The green-clothed man's gaze turned cold when he heard that Miku had destroyed the sword master's token. He glanced at Miku, and then he looked at Ku Su. He doesn't recognize the sword master's token? Ku Su smiled bitterly. Sword master, this is a misunderstanding. A huge misunderstanding. After you gave me the sword master's token, I didn't tell anyone in the divine temple, so they don't recognize it. This is a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. The green-clothed man was expressionless, and he was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, Dad, your people said that they want to send me off. Miku, Yi Xian said again. They also said that their temple is invincible in the world, there is no one they fear. Miku and Ku Su's expressions became extremely ugly. Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but the plainly dressed woman suddenly grabbed his hand. There's no need for this. If you want to kill, then kill. With that, she gently waved her jade-like hand. Miku was directly wiped out. Forcefully erased. The plain-dressed woman looked at Yi Yuan and asked, Do you know where the divine temple is? Yu Mu instantly trembled when he heard the woman in a plain dress. Was this woman going to destroy the entire divine temple? Yi Yuan hesitated for a moment, and then he gazed at the green-clothed man. The woman in a plain dress suddenly said, There's no need to look at him. He can't stop me from annihilating anyone. He couldn't block it. Yi Xian's blood was boiling. Holy shit. Qing'er didn't even give face to his father. Yi Xian looked at the green-robed man. The green-robed man laughed and said, Indeed, I can't stop her. If I want to kill someone, she can't stop me. They're targeting me. The woman in a plain dress gazed at the green-robed man and said, Let's fight. The green-robed man blinked and said, Let's do it. Yi Xian was instantly quite excited when he heard this. After all, if his father and Qing'er were to fight, then it would definitely be extremely brilliant. Right at this moment, Xiao Ta suddenly cursed, Young madam, you idiot. Hurry up and stop them. If they start fighting, then everyone here will die. Not just everyone here. Human, the universe here is going to be finished. Yi Xian instantly recovered from his shock when he heard Xiao Ta. Right? If my father and Qing'er start fighting, then wouldn't this universe be finished? Yi Xian hurriedly stopped Qing'er who was about to attack. Qing'er. The woman in a plain dress gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Can we not fight for now? The woman in a plain dress fell silent for a short moment and nodded. However, I'm definitely annihilating this divine temple today. As she spoke, she suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment, a sword suddenly pierced through the space between Ku Su's brows. It was an instant kill. The woman in a plain dress slowly closed her eyes. After a short moment, she suddenly withdrew her sword and opened her palm. The walking sword in her hand suddenly flew out. Annihilate the divine temple. She'd absorbed Ku Su's memories just now, so she knew the location of the divine temple. Ku Su wasn't completely dead yet. He looked at the green-robed man and begged, Sword Master, please consider our relationship in the past and save my divine temple. Yi Xian suddenly said, Old monk, can't you be a little more shameless? Ku Su looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, The person you're begging is my father. What did all of you want to do just now? All of you wanted to send me off from the afterlife. Now, all of you are asking my father to save all of you. You can't be so shameless. Ku Su was speechless. The green-robed man suddenly shook his head and smiled when he heard Yi Xian. Ku Su, everything has karma. Cultivate in your next life. As he spoke, he lightly patted Ku Su on the shoulder. Bang! Ku Su disappeared. He was actually saving Ku Su because if the woman in the plain dress killed him, she would directly erase Ku Su. He killed Ku Su to give Ku Su a chance to reincarnate. The green-robed man glanced at the cold Tianming and smiled. You're still so hot-tempered. He also wanted to fight with Tianming, but he wouldn't do it now. Whether it was him or the woman in the plain dress, they wouldn't fight now. It was because of Yi Xian. If both of them were injured, what would happen to Yi Xian? This guy was a troublemaker. Before Yi Xian truly grew up, they wouldn't fight. In fact, the white-robed swordsman was the most depressed. Because of Yi Xian, the two of them wouldn't fight with him. He was very frustrated. At this moment, a sword suddenly fell straight down from the starry sky. Walking sword. The woman in the plain dress opened her palm and the walking sword landed steadily in her hand. Obviously, the divine temple was gone. There was no more divine temple in the world. The woman in the plain dress turned to look at Yumu. Anyone else? Yumu stared at the woman in the plain dress. No more. The woman in the plain dress waved her hand and a ray of sword light shot out. At this moment, an angry shout suddenly resounded from the distant sky. Stop! The voice was like thunder that shook the heavens and the earth. The ray of sword light stopped half an inch away from Yumu's eyebrows. The woman in the plain dress looked up at the sky. The sky suddenly split open and an old man in black walked out. As soon as the old man walked out, the surrounding space trembled violently. At the same time, the entire heavens and the earth instantly became illusory. The heavens and the earth couldn't withstand the old man at all. Seeing the old man in black, Yumu's expression changed drastically. Uncle Mu, leave quickly. The old man in black glanced at Yumu and then looked at the woman in the plain dress. I'm Lin Mu, a consecrator of the Sky Demon Kingdom. Miss, Yumu is the daughter of the Sky Demon Kingdom's king. Please give face to the Sky Demon Kingdom. Sky Demon Kingdom? The woman in the plain dress frowned slightly. What's that? The old man stared fixedly at her. With your strength, it's absolutely impossible that you haven't heard of the Sky Demon Kingdom. The woman gazed at the old man. Where's the Sky Demon Kingdom? Point me in a direction. Point me in a direction. When he heard her, Xiao Ta within Yi Xian's body suddenly said, attack all around. Yu Mu's expression changed drastically. Uncle Mu, you can't tell her. This woman's strength has far exceeded our understanding. She can't be allowed to head to the Sky Demon Kingdom. The old man spoke in a low voice. Miss, give her a chance so that we can meet again in the future. The woman in the plain dress shook her head. I like to never see her again. As she spoke, she was about to attack. Meanwhile, Yumu hurriedly spoke. Senior, I've already paid the price. Isn't that enough? The woman nodded. Actually, it's enough. Yumu was taken aback for a moment before asking, then why did you? She glanced at Yumu. I haven't killed to my heart's content. She hasn't killed to her heart's content. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in the surroundings was stunned. She hasn't killed to her heart's content? How many people has she killed? Even Yi Xian himself was stunned. Qing Er's way of thinking is quite dangerous. Yumu took a deep and long glance at the woman, and then she gazed at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, can my life end here? At this moment she finally understood. Don't try to reason with her, it's useless. It's completely useless. The only person present here that could make this woman in a simple dress change her mind was Yi Xian. Yi Xian fell silent when he heard Yumu. Yumu continued, family shouldn't be harmed. Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Yumu, you should leave. Yumu was stunned when she heard this. He wants me to leave? Yi Xian smiled. Don't you want to live? Yumu gazed at Yi Xian. Why? Yi Xian smiled. Miss Yumu, is there any blood feud between us? Yumu shook her head. No. But aren't you afraid that I'll take revenge on you after I leave? Yi Xian laughed. My Qing Er is invincible. If you want revenge, go ahead and find her. Yumu was speechless. The woman glanced at Yumu. Let's go. Saying this, she opened her palm, and the sword ray between Yumu's eyebrows flew back into her hand. Yumu glanced at Yixian. Thank you. Saying this, she turned and left. After a few steps, Yumu suddenly stopped and turned to look at Yixian. Young Master Yi, please come to Sky Demon Kingdom when you have time. Yixian smiled. All right. Yumu nodded. Goodbye. Saying this, she glanced at the woman, then turned and disappeared into the horizon with Elder Mu. At the end of the starry sky, Yumu turned to look. Her eyes were unprecedentedly solemn. Beside her, Lin Mu asked, Girl, who is that woman? Yumu shook her head. I don't know. Lin Mu looked at the Yuan realm in the distance and said softly, She's strong, but, as he spoke, the corner of his lips curled into a cold smile. She dares to look down on my Heaven Fei kingdom. How arrogant, see. A ray of sword ray pierced through Lin Mu's forehead without warning. In the blink of an eye, Lin Mu disappeared. Erased. FPZW. Chapter 1758. Yumu was dumbfounded when she saw Lin Mu's death. Even Lin Mu was instantly killed? Lin Mu was 2 realms higher than her. But he was killed just like that? Could anyone in this world withstand a single strike from this woman? Yumu didn't think too much about it. She turned around and disappeared into the starry sky in the blink of an eye. Not long after, a gray-robed elder appeared in front of Yumu. He looked at Yumu and asked, What happened? Why is Lin Mu dead? Yumu took a deep breath and told him everything that had happened earlier. After a while, the gray-robed elder squinted his eyes. That world really has the divine level spring of eternal life. Hearing this, Mu's expression instantly changed. Elder Gu said softly, Sky Demon Kingdom knows about the divine level spring of eternal life in the Yuan realm. Even the small grotto heaven and the ancient world know about it. Yumu said solemnly, Don't attack the divine level spring of eternal life. Elder Gu said, We won't give up. He paused for a moment before continuing, including my celestial Yao kingdom. Hearing this, Mu slowly closed his eyes. It's over. That was what she was thinking. Yuan realm. Beside Yixian, the woman in a plain dress had a calm expression. A ray of sword light appeared on her fingertip and then vanished. Yixian walked to the man in green and smiled. Dad, I didn't expect that we would meet again so soon. The man in green smiled. I really didn't expect it. Yixian said solemnly, You and this temple. The man in green shook his head. You are more important than 10 temples. Hearing that, Yixian felt a warm current flow in his heart. He knew that his dad didn't oppose Qing, not because he was afraid of Qing, but because he didn't want to make things difficult for him. Thor was the same. Otherwise, with her temper, she would have beaten his dad up. Yixian seemed to have thought of something and asked hurriedly, Dad, where's Big Brother? The man in green smiled. He's waiting for me. Yixian blinked. Where are you going? The green-robed man laughed. A very far place. Yixian was speechless. His father was teasing him again. The azure-robed man smiled and said, I suddenly understood something. Yixian was a little curious. What is it? The green-robed man gently patted Yixian's shoulder. Your father, I have experienced too many hardships in the past. That's why I have the achievements I have today. So, I also want to let you go and let you experience more hardships. As he spoke, he shook his head and smiled. My thinking is actually wrong. Yixian was puzzled. Why is it wrong? The azure-robed man smiled and said, Do you know your grandfather? Yixian shook his head. The azure-robed man said softly, He left early. He left early. Yixian was stunned. The azure-robed man smiled slightly. Actually, I don't blame him. As he spoke, he patted Yixian's shoulder again. After this matter is over, go to the ancient realm. There are the strongest experts in this universe. Haven't you always wanted to know how strong the 3 of us are? When you surpass the current realm of this universe, you'll slowly know. Ancient realm. Yixian said in a deep voice, Father, I've only recently become a little more relaxed. I used to be quite miserable. Don't trick me, the azure-robed man's face darkened. Have I ever tricked you? Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. The azure-robed man laughed. You slippery fellow. Yi Xian smiled and said, Father, what kind of person is grandfather? After a moment of silence, the azure-robed man said, He's a very good person. He treats your father very well. He treats your grandmother even better. As he spoke, he smiled slightly. You're more fortunate than me. Yi Xian did not say anything. He knew that his father had suffered a lot in the past. It could be seen from the crazy demon bloodline. His father was probably not a good person in the past. The azure-robed man suddenly said, Don't be unreasonable. Father is leaving. We'll wait for you there. As he spoke, he glanced at Tianming. I'll be going first. As he spoke, he turned into a sword light and disappeared into the horizon. Yi Xian turned to Qing'er. Qing'er, you're going too? The azure-robed woman nodded. Yi Xian hesitated and said, Where are you going? The azure-robed woman shook her head. Let's not talk about this. I came to see you and take you somewhere. Yi Xian was curious. Where is it? The azure-robed woman said, Let's go. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Wait. As he spoke, he looked at Yuan. Senior Yuan, farewell. Yuan hesitated for a moment and said, Young master, I want to hand Ling Chu over to you. Yi Xian was stunned for a moment before he said, Senior Yuan, this is your... Yuan shook his head. Young master, don't refuse just yet. This divine rank spirit vein is really not a good thing for our Yi clan right now. Its existence is a huge calamity. You can help us once or twice, but you can't help us forever, right? Ling Chu is too tempting. We don't have the strength to protect her if she stays here. Moreover, staying here isn't beneficial to her. Besides that, Ling Chu wants to go with you. Yi Xian turned to look at Ling Chu, who was not far away. Ling Chu giggled. Can I follow you? It was impossible for her to improve if she stayed here. There was only one way to improve, and that was to see Snowy. Only by following Yi Xian would she be able to see Snowy. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Are you really willing to go with me? Ling Chu hurriedly nodded. Yi Xian said with a smile, Come with me then. Ling Chu was clearly very excited. She transformed into a violet dragon and flew onto Yi Xian's arm. Yi Yuan heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Yi Xian agree to take Ling Chu with him. He wanted to keep such a divine treasure as well, but he knew that the Yi clan couldn't keep it. Because there might be countless mysterious powers paying attention to this place right now. Yi Xian glanced at Ling Chu, and then he looked at Yuan. He roared with laughter, Senior Yi, take care. Miss Yi, take care as well. He gazed at Yi Xian, take care. Yi Xian nodded, and then he and the woman vanished on the spot. After the woman and Yi Xian left, Yuan said softly, What a terrifying woman. The others nodded. Meanwhile, Yuan Qing from the Yuan clan spoke abruptly, Big brothers, are you interested in heading to the origin dimension? Yuan Yen immediately said, Let's go. Yuan Xiu roared with laughter, Let's go. On the other side, Xiao Ju watched Yi Xian and the woman disappear into the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. Yi looked into the distance, deep in thought. Yuan, Xiao Lin, and Yuan Qiu looked at each other. The three of them had smiles in their eyes. They knew that the younger generation of the three clans wanted to go out and explore. To them, this was naturally a great thing. In an unknown starry sky, the woman in the plain dress led Yi Xian slowly. They looked slow, but they were actually very fast. However, Yi Xian couldn't feel it. Not long after, the woman in the plain dress suddenly stopped. At this moment, a woman suddenly walked out from afar. Prince Zhuang Weiran. Seeing Yi Xian, Zhuang Weiran was slightly stunned. It's you. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Greetings, senior. Zhuang Weiran nodded and looked at the woman in the plain dress. The woman in the plain dress said, Go find him. I will guard this world from now on. Zhuang Weiran was silent for a moment before saying, All right. After saying that, she disappeared directly. The woman in the plain dress waved casually and a streak of sword light appeared in the surroundings. Yi Xian took a look at that streak of sword light. He knew that without the woman in the plain dress's permission, no one from the outside could enter this place. The woman in the plain dress led Yi Xian and disappeared on the spot. Not long after, the woman in the plain dress brought Yi Xian to a broken city. Yi Xian looked around and asked in a low voice, "Where are we?" The woman in the plain dress said, "Our former home." Former home. Yi Xian was stunned. The woman in the plain dress pulled Yi Xian's hand and walked into the city. After entering the city, Yi Xian realized that it was an empty city. There was no sign of life. The city was in ruins and some of the buildings were already rotting. It was obvious that this place had been here for countless years. The woman in the plain dress pulled Yi Xian to the front of a residence. The residence was covered in spiderwebs and the weeds around the residence were dozens of feet tall. The woman in the plain dress waved her hand and the weeds and spiderwebs disappeared. The entire residence looked brand new. The woman in the plain dress turned around and looked at Yi Xian. "Do you find this place unfamiliar?" Yi Xian nodded his head. The woman in the plain dress said softly, "That is normal. Because I sealed your memories." Memories? Yi Xian looked at the woman in the plain dress in shock. "Sealed my memories?" The woman nodded. "I sealed your memories when you were young." Yi Xian said solemnly, "Why?" The woman in the plain dress said, "In the past, you were too young and couldn't bear those bad memories. So, I sealed your memories. Now, you can bear those memories." As she said that, she patted Yi Xian's shoulder. Bang! From the depths of Yi Xian's body, a ray of sword light suddenly flew out. And at this moment, countless memories flowed into Yi Xian's mind like a tide, in a residence. A little boy was carrying a little girl on his back and running around. On the little boy's back, the little girl held a small wooden sword in her hand. She constantly waved it and laughed like a bell. She was extremely happy. After a while, the little boy seemed to be a little tired and he put the little girl down. The little boy leaned against a rock and was sweating profusely. However, the smile on his face was very bright. The little girl sat on the little boy's lap and smiled sweetly. "Brother, let me show you my new sword technique." As she said that, she stomped on the ground and did a backflip. Her little hand held the wooden sword and stabbed forward lightly. Then, she took a step forward and flicked the sword in her hand. Very slow, but it was very well done. At this moment, a mocking laugh suddenly rang out. "What a piece of trash." Hearing that, the little girl stopped and turned to look. She saw a little fatty standing not far away. The little fatty looked at the little girl and said mockingly, "Your sword technique doesn't have any Xianqi at all." "I'm sorry, I forgot. You're born with a useless body and can't cultivate Xianqi at all." At this moment, the little boy who had been sitting on the ground suddenly jumped up. He jumped in front of the little fatty at lightning speed. Before the little fatty could react, the little boy kicked the little fatty's crotch. The little fatty's eyes rolled back and his mouth opened so wide that an egg could be stuffed in. The little boy did not let go. He looked up at the little fatty and said, "Apologize to my sister." The little fatty's body tensed up and he said with a trembling voice, "Don't hit the balls when you hit people." You first, let go," the little boy said angrily. "Apologize?" The little fatty hurriedly said, Sorry, was wrong." The little boy said angrily, "Is an apology enough?" The little fatty was a little confused. The little boy glanced at the money bag on the little fatty's waist. "Apologize. You've apologized, but you haven't paid for it." The little fatty said angrily, "You're robbing." The little boy tightened his grip slightly. "Arg." The little fatty immediately let out a miserable cry and he hurriedly said, I'll pay. As he said that, he removed the money bag from his waist and handed it to the little boy. The little boy took the money bag and turned to carry the little girl on his back and ran. Behind him, the little fatty roared hysterically, "Bandit! Shameless! Hitting people and hitting the balls, you don't care about martial ethics?" In the distance, the little boy carried the little girl on his back and ran wildly. The little girl said softly, "Brother, why can you all cultivate Xianqi but I can't? They said that I will never be able to become a Xianqi cultivator in my lifetime, Is that true? The little boy immediately said, Nonsense. The little girl said softly, Then why can you all cultivate Xianqi but I can't? The little boy fell silent for a long time before he said, Because your physique is trash. It's the physique of an ordinary person. The little girl tilted her head and looked at the little boy's side profile. The physique of an ordinary person? The little boy nodded. The physique of an ordinary person. The little girl asked, What's the physique of an ordinary person? The little boy thought for a moment and said, It's the physique of an ordinary person. The little girl was slightly puzzled. Isn't the physique of an ordinary person very, very ordinary? The little boy fell silent for a long time before he said, It's because it's very ordinary that it's very formidable. The little girl was still puzzled. The little boy thought for a long time before he said, Because an ordinary physique represents limitless possibilities. The little girl asked again, Brother, who told you that? The little boy said, I bragged. When he spoke up to hear, he hurriedly changed his words. The ancestor told me when I was dreaming. The little girl nodded slightly. Oh. Meanwhile, the little boy suddenly said, No matter what, brother will always protect Qing. The little girl smiled sweetly. She wrapped her arms around the little boy's neck and buried her head in the little boy's back. Brother, will you always protect me? The little boy nodded. Yes. The little girl was slightly nervous and asked hurriedly, Unless what? The little boy said, Unless I'm dead. P.S. It's a new month. Vote for those who have a guaranteed monthly ticket. Thank you, big brothers. Chapter 1759. The memories were like a tide, but not fierce, only warm. At this moment, Yi Xian understood everything about Qing'er and his childhood. At that time, Qing'er was just a naive little girl. Her life goal was to become a swordsman. All of this was because of one incident. Tendo was heartless. That time, Tendo destroyed the world. And because of that Tendo destroyed the world, the fate of the little boy and the little girl were changed inside the mansion. After a long time, Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. His face was covered with tears. At this moment, he remembered everything, including the incident in the cave. Yi Xian turned to look at the plain-dressed woman beside him, Qing'er. The plain-dressed woman held Yi Xian's hand, softly saying, Brother. Yi Xian gently hugged Qing'er. The brother and sister held each other in silence. At this moment, in Yi Xian's arms, the plain-dressed woman's cheeks had 2 lines of clear liquid. At this moment, the big brother in front of her was the most complete. After a long time, Yi Xian and Qing'er sat in front of the mansion. Yi Xian looked at the horizon, softly saying, Qing'er, it's time to go. Qing'er nodded. If you don't want me to go, then I won't go. Yi Xian turned to look at Qing'er. You found a new world, right? Qing'er nodded. Yi Xian asked again, That new world can interest you, it must be very strong, right? Qing'er's expression was calm, just a little bit interested. A little bit interested. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. A world that could pique the interest of Qing'er, his father, and his big brother was definitely not an ordinary world. Qing'er suddenly grabbed Yi Xian's hand and looked at Yi Xian. If you don't want me to leave, I'll stay. Yi Xian didn't answer the question. Instead, he asked, Qing, the reason why you didn't fight with big brother and father was because of me, right? Qing'er nodded. Yi Xian asked again, If we really fight, are you confident? Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. I'm invincible. Invincible. Yi Xian was stunned for a moment before bursting into laughter. He knew that if he asked his big brother and old father, they would probably answer the same. As for who was stronger among the 3, they would only know after they fought. Yi Xian continued, Qing'er, if you fight, it will be a fight to the death, right? Qing'er nodded. Yi Xian continued, The reason why old father and I didn't fight is because of me. In other words, I am still very weak in this vast universe, right? Qing'er hesitated, then said, Not that weak. Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. His heart warmed. He finally realized it. Other than himself, everyone else was weak in Qing'er's eyes. Yi Xian collected his thoughts. he leaned against the stone steps behind him and put his hands behind his head. Qing'e, let's go. Qing'e looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. If I follow old father, I will never be stronger than you. Qing'e was silent. Yi Xian stood up. He looked at the sunset in the distance and smiled. Qing'e, I want to be stronger than you. Qing'e looked at Yi Xian. Why? Yi Xian said with a smile, as long as I become stronger than you, you won't fight each other and you won't die. Qing'e was silent. Yi Xian turned to Qing'e and smiled. Do you believe me? Qing'e nodded. Yes. Yi Xian laughed. This was the first time he'd aroused the thought of surpassing Qing'e and the others. Because he knew that if he didn't, then the three of them might kill each other in the end. They were already invincible. Only a fight to the death could determine victory or defeat, or surpass themselves. Unless the three of them met an even stronger opponent. If there was no stronger opponent, they would have to fight to the death. He didn't want to see that day. Qing'e suddenly said, Don't force yourself. Even if you are not invincible, I will stay by your side and protect you forever. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. No, Qing'e, you shouldn't stop because of me. He grabbed Qing'e's hand. I will work hard to become stronger and catch up to you. Qing'e looked at Yi Xian. It might be difficult. Yi Xian laughed. It's okay. I think I can catch up. Xiaota said I have that halo. Xiaota was speechless. Qing'e blinked. Halo. Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. Is that? Oh right, it's the protagonist's halo. Qing'e opened her palm, and Little Pagoda appeared in her hand. Little Pagoda laughed awkwardly. Big Sister Tianming. I was just spouting nonsense. Tianming glanced at Xiaota, then looked at Yi Xian. This Xiaota is not serious. Don't talk nonsense with him. Yi Xian was speechless. Xiaota was speechless. Qing'e returned Xiaota to Yi Xian. I will wait as long as it takes. Yi Xian smiled. I won't let you wait too long. Qing'e nodded. But Yi Xian suddenly said, Qing'e, can I ask you some questions? Qing'e nodded. But Yi Xian quickly asked, Qing'e, the sword that decides life and death is about killing intent, right? Qing'e nodded. But Yi Xian said, that is to say, the stronger the killing intent, the more powerful it is, right? Qing'e shook her head. Only half of it. Yi Xian looked at Qing'e. What do you mean? Qing'e said, killing intent is composed of two parts. The first is killing intent. When killing intent arises, there will be killing intent in the heart. The second part is killing intent. When killing intent and killing intent transform, it can condense intent. In other words, killing intent can be used to gather energy. Yi Xian said, the stronger the killing intent, the more powerful the sword is, right? Qing'e shook her head once more. It's the killing intent. The stronger the killing intent, the stronger the killing heart. The stronger the killing heart, the stronger the killing intent. The stronger the killing intent, the stronger the condensed killing force. The core is killing intent. As she spoke, she opened her palm. The walking sword appeared in her hand. Qing'e looked at Yi Xian. Do you know how to make your killing intent stronger? Yi Xian said, killing people? Qing'e nodded. Killing one is a sin. Killing 10,000 is a hero. Killing 9 million is a hero among heroes. The more people you kill, the stronger your killing intent. Yi Xian said, Qing'e, to what extent can your killing intent reach? Qing'e said, limitless. Yi Xian was stunned. Limitless. Qing'e nodded. As long as I want to, I can slaughter tens of thousands of universes with a single thought. Yi Xian. Beside Yi Xian, Xiaota hid back into the prison pagoda. This elder sister Tianming is too dangerous. Qing'e looked at Yi Xian. Now is the heaven ascension boundary. Yi Xian nodded. Qing'e gently waved her hand. In an instant, hundreds of thousands of time-dimensional rivers appeared around them. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Because he discovered that these time-dimensional rivers were Qing'e's own time-dimensional rivers, not of the world. Before this, he had only seen 8 or 9 of them condense at most. Qing'er could condense hundreds of thousands of time-dimensional rivers. This was too exaggerated. Exaggerated to the point of being abnormal. Qing'er suddenly said, "It can be more." Yixian said, "How much more is more?" Qing'er looked at Yixian. "Limitless. Limitless." Yixian was dumbfounded. Qing'er said, "Any realm can be limitless." Yixian said, "In other words, a realm can be cultivated for a lifetime?" Qing'er nodded. "You can say that, but when you reach limitless, this limitless is meaningless. So, at that time, you can go to the next realm." Yixian was puzzled. "Reach limitless?" Qing'er nodded. "Right now I am in the Heaven Ascension boundary. The Heaven Ascension boundary can condense the time dimension, and I can condense the time dimension infinitely. In this case, I have reached limitless, so this realm has no meaning for me." Yixian said in a low voice. "Qing'er, besides, is there anyone else who can achieve limitless within a realm?" Qing'er shook her head. "I have never seen it." Yixian frowned. "Not even the creator of this realm?" Qing'er looked at Yixian. "The creator of this Heaven Ascension realm is not even one in a million of me." As she spoke, her beautiful brows knit together slightly, and she said, "Wait, how can this person compare to me?" Yixian was dumbfounded. He was completely dumbfounded. Qing'er had surpassed the creator of this realm. How terrifying was that? At this time, Qing'er said, "This realm itself has many flaws." Yixian hurriedly asked, "Flaws?" Qing'er nodded. "The first flaw is that people can condense the time dimension, but people do not have a thorough understanding of this so-called time dimension. That is the essence. Many people can be said to know nothing about the essence of time and space-time. Without understanding the essence of time and space-time, even if they condense the time dimension, it is just a superficial appearance, a showy appearance." Yixian said in a low voice, "Qing'er, what is the essence of time and space-time?" Qing'er said, "Time and space-time is the continuation of space, and space is limitless and eternal." What is limitless and eternal? In the current universe, it can be understood that space has no boundaries and will exist forever. Yixian said in a low voice, "Can't we erase space?" Qing'er waved her lily-white hand, and the space to her right was erased. She pointed to the erased place. "What is this place now?" Yixian hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know." Qing'er said, "It is still space, but this is a destroyed space. But its essence is still space. So, under the current universe's rules, space will exist forever." Yixian looked at Qing'er. "Under the current universe's rules," Qing'er means? "And outside the current universe?" Qing'er was silent. Yixian asked softly, "What is it?" Qing'er said, "Brother, let's talk about things within the current universe's rules. If we talk about other things, they may not understand. But if I explain, they may ask 100,000 why." Yixian. Chapter 1760. Yixian was a little embarrassed. He knew that the difference between him and Qing'er was too great. Qing'er suddenly said softly, "Take it slow." Actually, it was only Yixian. If it was anyone else, she wouldn't even say a word. Asking her to discuss such a low-level thing? Was she tired of living? Yixian nodded. "I understand. Then, let's talk about this space." Qing'er thought for a moment, then opened her palm. A time dimension suddenly appeared in her hand. "Can you see what's different about it?" Yixian looked at the time dimension, then said in a low voice, "I can see it. But I still want to hear it from you, Qing'er." Qing'er rolled her eyes at Yixian. "Naughty!" Yixian laughed. Inside the world prison pagoda, shout aside. In this world, only Yixian dared to be naughty in front of Big Sister Qing. If anyone else dared to say a word of nonsense, Big Sister Qing would directly say, "Where is your home?" Qing'er explained, "Space is limitless and eternal. If you look closely, you'll find that the time dimension in my hand is limitless." As she spoke, she released her right hand. In an instant, the time dimension grew larger and larger. In the end, It covered the entire world, including the endless galaxy. Qing looked at Yi Xian. As long as I want, my time dimension can cover the entire universe. Yi Xian was silent. They were both at the heaven ascension stage, but the difference was too great. Yi Xian asked again, Qing, what about the mortal severing stage? Mortal severing. Qing opened her palm. The time dimension in the surrounding world directly condensed into a sword. Yi Xian's face was full of shock. This is... Qing said, Zhu Chen's method is to materialize the dimension of time. In other words, he's changing the dimension of time. To be able to reach this level, it means that he has truly grasped the essence of time and space-time. As she spoke, she paused for a moment before continuing. If you can grasp the essence of time and space, not only will you reach the infinite realm, but you will also reach the mortal realm. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before asking, how do I master the essence of space-time and time? Qing said nothing. Yi Xian said solemnly, it's very difficult, right? Qing shook her head. It's not difficult. However, it will take some time. Yi Xian quickly asked, how long? Qing looked at Yi Xian. It depends on your talent. Yi Xian asked again, if it were me, how long would it take? Qing wanted to say something but hesitated. Yi Xian was speechless. Qing said, I was wrong. It doesn't depend on talent, it depends on one's foundation. Bro, your foundation isn't particularly good, so if you want to understand the essence of space-time and time, you'll have to start from scratch. Yi Xian said solemnly, that means it'll take a long time, right? Qing nodded. Yi Xian asked softly, how long? Qing suddenly opened her palm, and Xiaota, who was in Yi Xian's body, fell into her palm. Looking at Xiaota, Qing's right hand tightened slightly. Boom! Xiaota trembled violently. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, this? Xiaota also hurriedly said, young master, save me. Yi Xian looked at Qing and was about to speak, when the world around them suddenly became illusory. Qing waved her sleeves, and the world returned to normal. Yi Xian was confused, not knowing what had happened. Qing suddenly handed Xiaota to Yi Xian. I've modified it. Now, the world inside is different from the world outside. Yi Xian blinked. Different? Qing nodded. 10 years of cultivation inside is equivalent to 1 day outside. Yi Xian was shocked. 10 years of cultivation inside is equivalent to 1 day outside? Qing nodded. I could have reversed more time, but this pagoda couldn't withstand my power, so I could only reverse it to this extent. Yi Xian looked at Xiaota and said, that means the world inside Xiaota is different from the world outside? Qing said, only the flow of time is different. I've reversed the flow of time inside. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Qing thought for a while and said, I'll accompany you for a few more days. I'll guide you in your cultivation. Yi Xian hastily said, okay. What he needed the most now was a good teacher. And Qing was undoubtedly the most suitable one, because he had learned Qing's swordsmanship and swordsmanship. So, Qing was the most suitable person to teach him. Qing suddenly said, I'll make a sword for you. Yi Xian blinked. Make a sword? Qing nodded. You need a sword that suits you. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the sword spirit appeared in his hand. My father gave this to me. Qing looked at the sword spirit and shook her head. This sword suits him, but not you. Moreover, although this sword is for you to use, it doesn't recognize you as its master. So, it's better if you don't want it. With that, she flicked her sleeves. The sword spirit was sent away by a ray of sword light. Yi Xian was speechless. Qing said, I sent her back to her master. Then, she pulled Yi Xian's hand and walked out. Yi Xian said, Qing, what sword do you want to make for me? Qing said, a sword that suits you. Yi Xian was curious. Qing, didn't you say that a powerful swordsman can use any sword? If you make a sword that's too strong for me, will it affect my swordsmanship? Qing said, it won't. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Qing said, it's weak anyway. It won't affect me. Then she regretted it. Yi Xian was speechless. Qing hesitated and said, You're actually quite strong. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Xianxia, you don't have to comfort me. I know there's still a gap between me and you. Xianxia was speechless. Xiaota suddenly said, Young master, you're the first to make Sister Tianming speechless. I'm afraid you're the last. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Qing disappeared with Yi Xian. When they showed up again, the brother and sister were already in a boundless starry sky. The plain-dressed woman led Yi Xian into the depths of the starry sky. Don't worry about the sword's grade. The so-called common sword and divine sword are both within the realm. As long as they are within the realm, what's the difference between common and divine swords? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, that so-called everything can be used as a sword. The plain-dressed woman said, it's also a realm. However, it's a realm outside the realm. As she spoke, she opened her palm and a wooden sword appeared in her hand. The woman in the plain dress looked at Yi Xian. This sword is a divine sword in my hand. Yi Xian said in a low voice, the sword is extraordinary because of the person, right? The plain-dressed woman nodded. You can make the sword extraordinary now. However, there's a limit to it. If you meet someone stronger than you, can you fight with a wooden sword? Yi Xian shook his head. If he used a wooden sword, he wouldn't be able to fight. Because whether he used a sword to decide life and death or drew a sword to decide life and death, he had extremely high requirements for the sword. The plain-dressed woman said, so, you don't have to stick to the common sword and divine sword. It doesn't matter what sword it is as long as you don't rely on it. As for relying, you've subdued your heart and won't make such a low-level mistake. Yi Xian nodded slightly. I understand. As he spoke, he looked at Qing. Qing, what sword are you going to make for me? Qing stopped moving and said, a special sword, and it's a sword that only you can utilize. As she spoke, she glanced at the starry sky in front of her and said, let's start with space-time. As she spoke, she opened her palm and swiped it lightly in front of her. With this swipe, the space in front of them started to disintegrate bit by bit. Needless to say, Yi Xian was slightly stunned at this moment. The space in front of him was disintegrating. This disintegration wasn't destruction, it was changing the structure of space. Qing was changing space. At this moment, Xiaota suddenly said in a trembling voice, Young Lord, she's changing the rules. Yi Xian said in a low voice in his heart, changing the rules? Xiaota said in horror, yes. She's changing the rules of this universe. Yi Xian looked at Qing in front of him with a complicated look in his eyes. Just how strong was this Qing? Was he bragging when he said he would surpass her? Yuan Realm. On this day, an old man suddenly came to Yuan Realm. On the old man's chest, there were two big black words, Sky Demon. Sky Demon Nation. Beside the old man was Na and Mu. Mu was silent. No one knew what they were thinking. At this moment, a man in black clothes suddenly appeared in front of them. The man in black clothes looked at the old man and smiled. So it's the third demon king of Sky Demon Nation. The third demon king looked at the man in black clothes. Small grotto heaven, Li Xianqing. He's said to be invincible in the space-time realm. Li Xianqing smiled. You flatter me. The third demon king suddenly turned his head. Since the people from the ancient world are here, why don't you come out and meet us? As soon as he said that, the space to the right of the third demon king suddenly split open. The next moment, a woman slowly walked out. The woman wore a white dress and a white bamboo hat. Her face was covered with a veil, and she held a 3-foot-long curved blade in her hand. Seeing the woman, the third demon king frowned. Your Blade Lady Mo from the ancient world. Blade Lady Mo. Hearing this name, Li Xianqing squinted his eyes. He looked at the woman in white clothes and a trace of battle intent flashed in his eyes. Blade Lady Mo looked down. That god-level spring of eternal life is in Yi Xian's hands. The third demon king said, that youth is with that mysterious woman. If we want to get the spring of eternal life, we have to kill that woman first. Kill the woman in white clothes first. Hearing the third demon king's words, Mu slowly closed his eyes. She tried to persuade them. But no one listened. Her master was in the Sky Demon Kingdom. Even if her master was in the Sky Demon Kingdom, his words wouldn't carry much weight, let alone her. At this moment, the third Demon King suddenly looked at Yumu. She can kill a space-time realm? Yumu nodded. The third Demon King nodded and didn't say anything. At this moment, Li Xianxing smiled and said, killing someone of the same level, isn't that simple? Blade Lady Mo also said, it's very simple. The third Demon King suddenly said, let's join forces to kill this woman first. Then we'll talk about the ownership of the spring of eternal life. Is there a problem? Li Xianxing shrugged. No problem. Blade Lady Mo looked at the third Demon King and raised her eyebrows. She said proudly, is there a need to join forces? P.S. Zongheng stage. Come if you have tickets. Quick, 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 quick. Chapter 1761. Yumu sighed softly. She didn't say anything, because she knew that it would be useless no matter what she said. Moreover, she would even offend someone. How strong was the woman in a simple dress? She didn't know. She really didn't know. She was at the space-time realm as well, but she couldn't sense the woman's true strength, because she killed with a single strike of her sword. However, she knew that the three people by her side weren't simple as well. All three of them were peak space-time realm experts, and they weren't ordinary peak space-time realm experts. The three of them could instantly kill space-time realm experts of the same level. As for mortal severing realm experts, they were like ants before the three of them. However, she knew that the three of them were absolutely not as strong as the woman in a simple dress. Only when they faced the woman in a simple dress would they realize how terrifying she was. Meanwhile, the third Demon King suddenly said, I know that you're invincible amongst your peers, but this woman's strength is probably extraordinary as well. It's best not to underestimate her. Li Xianxing glanced at the third Demon King and smiled. I can kill her if she isn't a Saint Ascension Realm expert. The Saint Ascension Realm. The third Demon King nodded slightly. There's no aura of a saint here. I presume she isn't a Saint Ascension Realm expert. However, we still can't underestimate her. It's better to be safe than sorry. Li Xianxing roared with laughter. I can kill anyone below the minor saint realm. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. Blade's woman Mo turned around and disappeared as well. The third Demon King's expression was calm, and no one knew what he was thinking. Yumu glanced at the third Demon King and said, the third Demon King is provoking them on purpose. The third Demon King glanced at Yumu and smiled. That little girl isn't simple at all. Yumu fell silent. The third Demon King spoke softly. She's very strong, right? Yumu immediately nodded. The third Demon King smiled. In your opinion, is she stronger or am I? Yumu was slightly hesitant. The third Demon King said, looks like she's stronger. Yumu spoke solemnly. Her strength is a mystery. As she spoke, she gazed at the third Demon King. The third Demon King didn't tell them about Elder Lin Mu being instantly killed because, at this point, she didn't say anything else. The third Demon King smiled. What a smart girl. Hearing this, He Mu's face darkened. The third Demon King said softly, there is always someone better than you out there. Although the godly spring of eternal life is tempting, if the other party is too strong, our Sky Demon Kingdom will naturally give it up. However, I have to see exactly how strong this woman is. Yumu looked at the three Demon Kings. The three Demon Kings want to use the two of them to test her? The third Goblin King nodded. If she can even kill those two instantly then. At this point, he glanced at He Mu. Lass, it's not that we don't believe him. It was just that he was still unable to come into contact with certain levels, so some of his judgments might be wrong. Therefore, I need to test this woman's true strength. If she's just an ordinary peak space-time realm expert, then we'll have to take revenge. If she can even kill those two, then our Sky Demon Kingdom will have to suffer this loss even if we don't want to. Yumu nodded slightly. I understand. If she was just an ordinary peak space-time realm powerhouse. Third Monster King laughed. I want to kill him, I want the spring of eternal life too. The news of the godly spring of eternal life appearing in the primordial realm spread quickly. For a time, other than the ancient realm, sky demon kingdom, and the small cave, beyond the heavens, countless mysterious powerhouses entered the primordial realm. However, after knowing that the godly spring of eternal life was with Yi Xian, those mysterious powerhouses immediately left the primordial realm to search for Yi Xian. Yi clan. In the main hall, the powerhouses of the Yi clan were all present. At this moment, everyone's expression was extremely solemn, because too many powerhouses had come during this period of time, all for the godly spring of eternal life. At this moment, an elder in the hall suddenly said, "Fortunately, the elder gave the godly spring of eternal life to young Master Yi Xian, or else our Yi clan would be in danger." In the hall, everyone nodded. If the godly spring of eternal life was still there, then the Yi clan would definitely be attacked by a group of powerhouses. On the main seat, Yi Yuan said softly, "I wonder if young Master Yi can hold on." He was actually quite worried because the strength of the powerhouses that had come had far exceeded his expectations. Meanwhile, a black-clothed old man suddenly appeared in the hall, and he spoke in a low voice. "Patriarch, I've received news that those mysterious powerhouses are madly searching for young Master Yi Xian." Yi Yuan's face instantly sank when he heard this. An elder suddenly said, "Do you need our help?" Yi Yuan shook his head. "There's no need for us to do anything with Senior Su Chang here. If that senior can't stop them, then we'll only be giving our lives away." As he spoke, a wisp of worry flashed through his eyes as he looked out of the hall. "I hope the young master is safe." Meanwhile, He spoke abruptly, "I think we shouldn't worry about the young master." Everyone looked at He, and he hesitated for a moment before he said, "I think that Senior Su Chang's temper isn't particularly good. If these people offend her, then wouldn't she destroy our universe if she gets angry?" Everyone was speechless. In the starry sky, the expanse of starry sky in front of her started to break down bit by bit under her control, and then it converged in front of her. Yi Xian gazed at her. Needless to say, he was beyond shocked right now. What sort of divine ability is this? The space in front of Qing wasn't vanishing, it was being reconstructed instead. This had exceeded the scope of his understanding. Suddenly, the hilt of a sword appeared in front of Qing. Yi Xian hurriedly walked over to Qing. Only the hilt?" Glanced at the sword hilt, and then she said, "This space is only suitable to be a sword hilt." Yi Xian blinked. "The hilt is suitable?" Nodded. "Come, let's go make the hilt." As she spoke, she took Yi Xian's hand and vanished on the spot. It didn't take long for Yi Xian and the woman to arrive in a temporal dimension. However, the temporal dimension here wasn't quite the same as the one Yi Xian had seen in the past. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. "Qing, the temporal dimension here." "Qing," suddenly said, "the river of time is the main vein of this universe." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "The main vein?" Qing nodded. "Every universe has a main vein of time, and it records the beginning and end of the universe. Very few people are able to come into contact with this main vein." She glanced at the surroundings as she spoke, and then said, "We're standing in the present. If we move forward, we'll return to the past, and if we move forward, we'll arrive at the future." To the future? Yi Xian hurriedly looked ahead, and he noticed that there were almost a few 100,000 Xiao Dao in front of him. Yi Xian gazed at Qing. "Qing," spoke softly, "the future is uncertain. Every move we make will result in a different outcome. So, the future is unknown and uncertain." Yi Xian spoke solemnly. "Can Qing predict the future?" Glanced at Yi Xian. "I can if I want to." Yi Xian blinked. "Then do you want to?" Qing shook her head. Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" He pointed forward and said, "I can change any future if I want to. I can even erase the future." Yi Xian was stunned, and then he smiled bitterly. He finally understood. Invincible. Qing was invincible. She was invincible, almost omnipotent. Yi Xian suddenly sighed. As Xiaoda said, an existence like Qing or should not exist in this world. At this time, Xiao Ta's face changed. He hurriedly said, "Young master, don't talk nonsense. I have never said such words. I swear on my master. No, I swear on my tower, I have never said such words." Yi Xian curled his lips. Qing Er's temper is so good, why is Xiao Ta so nervous? Xiao Ta was confused. Good temper? Good temper? Xiao Ta was silent. This young master has started not to speak human language. He glanced at Yi Xian, the corner of her mouth raised slightly. Yi Xian smiled. "Qing, your smile is so beautiful." Nodded, softly said, "I only smile for you to see." Yi Xian laughed. He grabbed Qing's hand. "I think I am the happiest person in the world." Inside Yi Xian, Xiao Ta sighed. He found that the plain-dressed woman gave all her good things to Yi Xian. She was also the person who doted on Yi Xian the most in the world. As long as Yi Xian willed it, she would not hesitate to destroy the entire universe. Qing grabbed Yi Xian's hand. She looked at Yi Xian. "I will forge the sword for you." With that, she turned around and flicked her sleeve. Boom! All of a sudden, the river of time in the surrounding main vein began to boil like boiling water. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Yi Xian's face fell. "Qing, what will happen if this main river of time is destroyed?" Qing looked at Yi Xian. "If the universe collapses, all life will cease to exist." Yi Xian blinked. "Don't tell me you want to use this main river of time to forge the sword for me?" Qing said, "I don't think there's a problem, but perhaps you don't want me to destroy this universe, right?" Yi Xian nodded quickly, "Yes." Although he wasn't a good person, he wouldn't be able to wipe out all living beings in this universe just because of a single thought of his. After all, there were countless living beings in this universe. Furthermore, there were many of his friends and family. Keter nodded. "I will not erase this universe, I will absorb the power of time in this main river of time." With that, she looked at Yi Xian. "I want to forge a sword with space-time as the hilt, time as the blade, and the nomological principles as the tip. This sword can only be used by me." Hearing this, Yi Xian felt his blood boiling. From Qing Er's words, this sword was definitely not an ordinary one. In Yi Xian's body, Xiao Ta was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, "It's over. The little lord has risen. Next, the act tough king will appear in the world." Chapter 1762. Needless to say, Yi Xian's blood was boiling at this moment. A sword forged by Qing. He was looking forward to it even more. From all around, the power of time converged on Qing. She was extracting the power of time from the entire universe, including the past, present, and future. Truth be told, Yi Xian didn't quite understand what this meant. If a top-notch expert was here, he or she would be shocked. Extracting the power of time from the present was not particularly difficult, but extracting the power of time from the past was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Extracting the power of time from the future was even more difficult. Theoretically speaking, extracting the power of time from the future was an impossible task, because the future was uncertain. But Qing did it. No one knew how she did it. If Yi Xian asked, she would definitely tell him, but Yi Xian didn't think about it at all. Gradually, a sword condensed into form in front of Qing. The sword was white, hard to notice if one didn't look closely. It was 3 feet long and 2 fingers wide. From the surface, the sword looked simple and unadorned. Time was the sword's body. At this time, the sword was completely formed. Qing flicked her sleeves, and the power of the world dispersed. Qing opened her palm, and the sword appeared in her palm. She looked at the sword in her hand, her expression calm. "It's a bit lacking. If I condensed it directly from this universe's main time vein, it would be better." Yi Xian sweated. Sometimes, Qing Er's way of thinking was really dangerous. Condensing it from this universe's main time vein was equivalent to erasing this universe. At this time, Qing suddenly combined the hilt with the sword. Boom! In an instant, Yi Xian felt the surroundings boil. Gently waved her hand, and everything returned to normal. looked at the sword in her hand, and it trembled slightly. Yi Xian walked to Qing'er's side and looked at the sword. Qing'er, this sword is special, right? Qing'er nodded. To you it's special. Yi Xian was speechless. He felt like he had been hurt many times. Qing'er continued, we're still missing the sword point and sword soul. With that, she disappeared with Yi Xian. When the siblings reappeared, they were already in a boundless starry sky. Qing'er slowly closed her eyes. Yi Xian glanced at Qing'er, not daring to disturb Qing'er. Right at this moment, the starry sky above Qing'er suddenly started trembling violently. In the next moment, a strand of extremely terrifying pressure swept down from that expanse of space, and then the entire starry sky started seething with excitement. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. At this moment he actually had a feeling of suffocation. Invincible. This was what he was feeling at the moment. The owner of this pressure was too terrifying. Apart from Qing'er's group of 3, this was the most terrifying pressure he had ever encountered. Just the pressure alone was enough to make him despair. Whose pressure was this? Xiaota suddenly said, Young lord, don't panic. With Sister Tianming here, no one can act tough. It paused for a moment, then added, except for you. Yi Xian. Just then, a shadow quietly formed above Qing'er's head. Yi Xian looked at the shadow. It was like a shadow, he couldn't see it clearly. But judging from the appearance, it seemed to be a woman. The shadow looked at the woman in the plain dress, its voice indifferent. How can you sense me? The woman in the plain dress shook her head. I don't like your tone. With that, she flicked her sleeves. With the sound of a sword ringing, a ray of sword light pressed against the shadow's forehead. Yi Xian's face turned solemn because he found that the shadow's hand had grabbed the sword light. Blocked Qing'er's sword? At this moment, the sword light pierced through the shadow's forehead without warning. Boom! In an instant, the shadow seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. Its whole body trembled violently, and then became illusory. The shadow said in astonishment, You? The woman in the plain dress walked in front of the shadow. I want to borrow some power of law from you. Is there a problem? The shadow hurriedly shook its head. No problem. Its voice was trembling. She confirmed that she couldn't beat this person. The woman in the plain dress nodded. I need to use your power of law to condense the tip of my sword. Remember, I want your power of law. After a moment of silence, the shadow opened its palm. In an instant, countless power of law gathered in its palm. Yi Xian walked to Qing'er's side. Qing'er, who is she? Qing'er said, the spirit of the supreme law of this universe. She can be considered to be a core existence of the current universe. As for her strength, she can be said to be one of the peak existences in the current universe. Yi Xian's heart shook when he heard this. No wonder a single pressure from her was so difficult to endure. Moreover, that pressure wasn't targeted at him. If it was targeted at him, then he wouldn't be able to fight back at all. This is the supreme law of this current universe. She's a real big shot. At this moment, the supreme law suddenly looked at Qing'er. You've jumped out of that circle. Qing'er glanced at the supreme law. Which circle are you talking about? The supreme law was speechless. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he asked, Qing'er, are there many circles? Qing'er nodded. Many. I don't know which one she's talking about. Yi Xian was speechless. The supreme law said in a low voice, the current circle of laws. Qing'er glanced at the supreme law. It jumped out hundreds of thousands of years ago. The supreme law's expression froze. After a moment of silence, she asked again, how did it jump out? Qing'er said, let's not discuss such a low-level question. The supreme law was speechless. Within Yi Xian's body, Xiaota sighed softly. Sigh, supreme law big shot, do you think you're the young master? It knew that Heaven's mandate would only answer Yi Xian's questions and patiently explain them. If others asked her a question, then she'd be merciful if she didn't stab them with her sword. The supreme law hesitated for a moment, but it didn't dare to continue asking. Because it realized that the woman in front of it was already slightly impatient. At this moment, Qing'er suddenly opened her palm. In an instant, The power of countless supreme laws started to gather in her palm. Gradually, a sword tip was formed. Yi Xian said softly, "Qing'e, does this sword tip formed from the supreme law have any special effects?" Qing'e said, "It can slash through all laws." As she spoke, she glanced at the supreme law and said, "Apart from her." The supreme law didn't say anything. It was formed from her power of laws, so it naturally couldn't slash through her. However, apart from her, it could slash through all laws in this universe. At this moment, the sword tip in Qing'er's hand suddenly finished forming, and she directly fused it with the hilt and blade. Bang! A powerful sword aura swept out from the sword. In an instant, the starry sky in the surroundings started to seethe once more, and then it was gradually destroyed. The sword tip was formed. At this moment, Qing'er pressed her fingers together and flicked the sword lightly, and it instantly calmed down. Qing'er glanced at the sword in her hand and said, "Only the sword's soul is left." As she spoke, she glanced at the supreme law before her. The supreme law's expression changed drastically. "Don't tell me she wants me to be the sword's soul?" Yi Xian's eyelids twitched as well. "Don't tell me Qing'er really wants this supreme law to be the sword's soul?" Meanwhile, Qing'er suddenly opened her palm, and then a sword flew out from within Yi Xian's body. The soul-suppressing sword. Qing'er sized it up and said, "The sword's soul needs to acknowledge you as its master, and it needs to be connected to your heart. Only then will you be able to truly control a sword." As she spoke, she gazed at the soul-suppressing sword in her hand. "This sword's soul is very suitable. However, its cultivation is too low right now, so I have to improve it." As soon as she finished speaking, she tapped the sword's soul with her finger. Bang! In an instant, the soul-suppressing sword started to tremble violently. It was forcefully improving it. The soul-suppressing sword's aura grew stronger and stronger. In the end, its aura actually caused Yi Xian to feel a certain amount of pressure. Meanwhile, Qing'e withdrew her hand and gazed at the soul-suppressing sword. "I've given her new life. She can devour any soul now, so you'll have to constantly feed her from now on. The more you feed her, the stronger she'll become." Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "Feed what?" Qing'er replied, "Souls." Yi Xian was speechless. Qing'er directly fused the soul-suppressing sword with the sword in her hand. Bang! A sword howl suddenly shot into the sky and shot deep into the starry sky. At this moment, countless stellar regions heard this sword howl. A dark-clothed man suddenly stopped moving in an unknown part of the starry sky. It was Li Xianqing from the minor abode. Li Xianqing turned around and looked towards the distance, and then the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. "Found it." As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. In another part of the boundless starry sky, Lady Mo suddenly stopped moving as well. A moment later, she turned around and slashed, causing the space in front of her to be torn open. After that, she stepped into the torn space and started to travel through space. In the starry sky, the plainly dressed woman handed the sword in her hand to Yi Xian. "It's yours." Yi Xian took the sword. As he held it, he immediately felt Little Soul's presence. At this moment, he felt as if he and the sword were one. Clearly, this was because of Little Soul. Yi Xian looked at Qing'e. "Qing'e, what's so special about this sword?" Qing'e said, "Space-time is the hilt, and space-time is the sword. With this sword, you can travel to any space-time and not be restricted by any space-time. Not only that, but with a thought, the sword can appear in any space-time." Yi Xian shifted his consciousness. In an instant, the sword in his hand appeared in the undead Imperial clan, which was countless galaxies away. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He had just been thinking about it, but he never expected that the sword would appear in the undying Emperor clan. That wasn't the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that he could feel everything in the undying Emperor clan through the sword. It was as if he himself was in the undying Emperor clan. At this time, Qing'er said, "You can use this sword to travel freely through the space-time of the myriad worlds. All space-time restrictions have no effect on you. You can reach the undying Emperor clan in an instant." Yi Xian opened his palm, and the sword appeared in his hand. Looking at the sword, Yi Xian fell silent. Originally, space-time had its restrictions and resistance. But now that he had this sword, space-time had no restrictions or resistance. He could travel through the myriad worlds with a thought. Of course, he was thinking about why Qing'er could kill people in a second. There was only one word to describe it: fast. He could do it very fast now. Of course, compared to Qing'er, he was far inferior. But compared to others? Qing'er said, "As for the power of time," at this point she frowned and turned to look. Not far away, a man in black clothes was slowly walking over. Li Xuani, invincible in the space-time realm. After Li Xuani appeared, he looked at the Supreme Law and smiled. "So there is someone faster than me. Sir, are you also here to kill this woman?" Hearing this, the Supreme Law's expression changed. She stared at Li Xuani. "Don't speak nonsense, or I will exterminate your entire clan. P.S. The weather has been getting colder and colder. Everyone please keep warm. Especially those with children at home. My son has caught a cold. He's been crying in the middle of the night every day. He's about to collapse. Everyone, please keep warm, and remind your family to keep warm." Chapter 1763. Kill this woman? The Supreme Law almost went berserk. Where did this idiot come from? Sure, show off, but don't drag me into it. I can't even hide in time. Li Xianxia frowned slightly. "I'm not here to kill her." The Supreme Law turned to look at the plain-dressed woman. "I don't know him." His desire to live was very strong. The plain-dressed woman looked at Li Xianxia without saying a word. Li Xuanqing's gaze also landed on the plain-dressed woman. When he saw her, he frowned slightly. Something was wrong. At this moment, he felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Is she from the Sky Demon Nation?" Upon hearing Yi Xian's words, Li Xianqing smiled and said, "I'm Li Xianqing of the Small Grotto Heaven." Small Grotto Heaven? Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Li Xianqing? I've never heard of you." Li Xianqing laughed. "Isn't it normal that you've never heard of me when you're in the lowest level of this universe?" Yi Xian. At this moment, the Supreme Law suddenly said, "She's from the Small Grotto Heaven." Li Xianqing looked at the Supreme Law with a hint of seriousness in his eyes. "Who is it?" At this moment, he suddenly realized that this Supreme Law was very dangerous. After a moment of silence, the Supreme Law said, "Chen Dongxian is the ancestral master, right?" Li Xianqing narrowed his eyes. "Who is it?" The Supreme Law looked at Li Xianqing coldly. Ancestral Master Chen Dongxian is someone after all. Why is there such an idiot among his descendants? Li Xuanqing's eyes gradually turned cold. "How dare you humiliate me?" The Supreme Law was expressionless. "Humiliate? You don't have that right." Li Xuanqing's lips curled into a sinister smile. "Arrogant." As he spoke, he flicked his sleeves, and a powerful force swept toward the Supreme Law. However, that powerful force disappeared without a trace as soon as it reached the Supreme Law. Li Xianqing was stunned at the sight of this. "Arrogant." The Supreme Law looked at Li Xianqing coldly. "Even if the ancestral master sees me, he has to kowtow obediently." Li Xianqing was so angry that he laughed. "What a joke!" As he spoke, he suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment, he appeared directly above the Supreme Law's head. Then he stomped his foot down. Heaven and earth trampling. As soon as he finished speaking, a gigantic footprint that was 1,000 feet long came crashing down from the top of the Supreme Law's head. Boom! In an instant, the entire starry sky became illusory. Right at this moment, the huge footprint vanished without a trace, and the Supreme Law didn't even budge an inch. In the air, Li Xuanqing's face was filled with disbelief. At this moment, the Supreme Law opened its palm. "Imprison." As soon as he finished speaking, the space around Li Xianqing transformed into a bloody cage. Seeing this, Li Xuanqing's expression instantly changed. The laws of heaven and earth, it's the legendary Supreme Laws. Supreme Laws. Li Xuanqing's entire body was trembling. What kind of existence was a supreme law? That was the existence of the ceiling of this current universe. Even the patriarch of the small grotto heaven was as weak as an ant in front of her, let alone him. Why was this supreme law here? The supreme law was about to speak, but at this moment, the woman in a plain dress suddenly spoke. He seems to be looking for me. Hearing this, the supreme law's expression instantly changed, and she hurriedly bowed. Senior, such a person isn't worthy of your attention at all. Seeing the supreme law address the woman in a plain dress as senior, Li Xuanqing's face was filled with astonishment. Senior? The supreme law was so respectful to this woman? The woman in a plain dress glanced at Li Xianqing. His target seems to be me. Li Xianqing stared fixedly at the woman in a plain dress. Who is it? The woman in a plain dress shook her head. Why do you all like to ask such boring questions? As she spoke, she looked at the supreme law. Do you know where that small grotto heaven is? The supreme law nodded. The woman in a plain dress said, Point me in a direction. Yi Xian was speechless. The supreme law hesitated for a moment, and then pointed to the right. The woman in a plain dress opened her palm, and a sword appeared in her hand. She was just about to attack when she seemed to have thought of something, and her brows furrowed. A short moment later, she turned to look at Yi Xian. I need some opponents to temper myself. Are you confident? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he turned to look at the supreme law. Is this small grotto heaven very strong? The supreme law glanced at Yi Xian. It's not especially strong. Yi Xian nodded slightly, and then he smiled. I'm confident. Within the world prison pagoda. Xiao Ta sighed softly in his heart. Young lord, this idiot has confidence my ass. That person before us is the ceiling of the current universe. Is his being weak the same as his being weak? The woman in a plain dress nodded slightly when she heard Yi Xian. Then I'll deal with him myself. As she spoke, she looked at Li Xianqing. The latter said fiercely, Who exactly is it? The woman in a plain dress waved her hand casually. Bang! Li Xuanqing's entire body trembled violently, and then his body vanished. At this moment, she looked at Yi Xian. Absorb him. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly let go of the soul-suppressing sword in his hand. The soul-suppressing sword transformed into a black ray of light and entered Li Xuanqing's body. Bang! Li Xuanqing's entire body trembled violently, and his soul gradually started to vanish swiftly. It was absorbed by the soul-suppressing sword. However, because his soul was very strong, the soul-suppressing sword was actually unable to absorb it immediately. Li Xianqing wanted to resist, but he couldn't resist at all. It was as if his body had been frozen. As he watched his soul vanish bit by bit, Li Xianqing was finally terrified. He was truly terrified, because he knew that once his soul was absorbed, then it was equivalent to being wiped out. At this point, Li Xianqing suddenly roared furiously, Do you dare let me call for help? Call for help? Yi Xian was speechless. The woman glanced at Li Xianqing, and then she waved her hand lightly. The soul-suppressing sword flew back into her grasp, and then she gazed at Li Xianqing. Go on. Li Xianqing glanced coldly at her, and then he gazed at the supreme law. Your supremacy, you won't interfere, right? Actually, he was even more afraid of the supreme law than the woman in a plain dress. Even though the woman had destroyed his body with a single swing of her sword, as far as he was concerned, it was because he'd been imprisoned by the supreme law. The supreme law glanced at Li Xianqing. I won't interfere. Li Xianqing instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. He opened up his palm, and a violet token suddenly appeared there. Li Xianqing silently chanted an incantation, and it didn't take long for the violet token to suddenly shoot into the sky and vanish. In the deepest depths of the starry sky. Meanwhile, the supreme law suddenly said, Is there something wrong with your head? Li Xianqing gazed at the supreme law, and then he hesitated for a moment before he said, Senior, what do you mean? The supreme law sighed softly and didn't say another word. Actually, she suddenly understood a little. Was Li Xianqing stupid? He definitely wasn't stupid. Not to mention Li Xianqing, Even she herself had underestimated the woman in a plain dress in the beginning. However, unlike Li Xianqing, she'd immediately realized how terrifying the woman in a plain dress was as soon as she attacked. She was an outsider. Moreover, she was the second outsider she'd encountered. Meanwhile, the woman in a plain dress turned around and walked over to Yi Xian, and then she passed the sword to Yi Xian. Yi Xian took the sword and asked, "Qing, how do I utilize the energy of time?" The woman said, "The energy of time within it has two uses. The first is offensive. With this sword in hand, one can enter anyone's temporal dimension at will." When she spoke up to this point, she paused for a moment and said, "Except for one type of person." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Which type?" The woman said, "Time cultivators." The Supreme Law's expression suddenly changed when he heard her, "Greetings, time cultivators." The woman glanced at the Supreme Law. "Yes." The Supreme Law said solemnly, "What do you think of them, senior?" The woman in a plain dress was expressionless. "A bunch of retards." The Supreme Law, Yi Xian asked, "Why do you say that?" The woman in a plain dress said, "They're cultivating in the wrong direction." The Supreme Law, who was at the side, hurriedly asked, "What's wrong?" The woman in a plain dress glanced at the Supreme Law. "Don't ask such a low-level question." The Supreme Law, Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, wanting to speak but holding back. Looked at Yi Xian. "You want to know?" Yi Xian nodded. The woman in a plain dress immediately explained, "Time isn't alone. There's only time when there's space-time. Without space-time, where's time?" They studied time but neglected the Tao of space-time, which was equivalent to putting the cart before the horse. Time is built on the foundation of space-time. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "Do you understand? If not, I'll explain in more detail." The Supreme Law, who was at the side, had an extremely ugly expression. "Damn it! Why was there such a huge difference between people?" Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. "I understand." The woman in a plain dress nodded. "You just have to remember one thing, space and time are inseparable." "That's not right. It's under the current laws of the universe that space and time are inseparable, which is space-time. This is because the place where the living beings of this current universe live is in space-time." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian's sword. "I've used this universe's main time vein to forge the sword's body. In other words, with this sword, no one can enter the space-time dimension, including those so-called time cultivators. Actually, this sword's power of time is rather special. You can slowly study it in the future, and it'll have a miraculous effect on you now." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." At this moment, the Supreme Law, who was at the side, hesitated for a moment, then said, "Senior, you said that within the current laws of the universe, time and space are inseparable. Does that mean that other universes can be separated?" The woman in a plain dress looked at the Supreme Law coldly. "Why do you have so much to say? Do you want to die?" The Supreme Law, Yi Xian. Chapter 1764. At this moment, the Supreme Law was extremely depressed. The reason why she had asked again was that she felt that the woman in the plain dress should be very easy to talk to. After all, Yi Xian would answer all her questions, and his attitude was surprisingly good. But at this moment, she realized that the woman in the plain dress only had a good attitude towards this young man. After figuring it out, the Supreme Law couldn't help but glance at Yi Xian with a trace of curiosity in her eyes. Who exactly is this young man? Meanwhile, Li Xianqing, who hadn't died yet, stared at the woman in the plain dress. A bad feeling suddenly arose in his heart, and this feeling was spreading ceaselessly. Why does this woman dare to berate the legendary Supreme Law? Yet this Supreme Law doesn't even dare to make a sound. Who exactly is she? In the distance, the woman in the plain dress picked up Yi Xian's sword. She used her finger to trace down the blade until she reached the tip, and then she flicked it lightly. A sword hum instantly resounded throughout the starry sky. Her passed the sword in her hand to Yi Xian. "Give it a name." Yi Xian smiled. "Let's call it Qing Xian sword." "Qing Xian." The woman looked at Yi Xian. "You know my name?" Xian nodded and smiled. Is it good? The corners of the woman's mouth curled up slightly. Excellent. Xian laughed. I think it's excellent too. The woman suddenly turned to look at Li Xianqing. Are your people here? Li Xianqing looked at the woman. Miss, can you let this matter go for the sake of the small abode? At this moment, he'd realized that something was off. This woman before him was definitely not an ordinary person. The woman looked at Li Xianqing. Sure. Li Xianqing instantly heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. At this moment, the woman in the plain dress spoke again. If you die, then we can settle this peacefully. Li Xianqing, how arrogant of you. At this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from the distant starry sky. In the next moment, an extremely terrifying pressure swept out from the depths of the starry sky like a tidal wave, and it was extremely shocking as if it wanted to crush the starry sky. The Supreme Law took a glance at the depths of the starry sky and frowned. Had this small grotto heaven gone mad? Who gave them the guts? At this time, an old man suddenly appeared above everyone. The old man was dressed in a long black robe, his hair and beard all white. His eyes were as sharp as blades, and no one dared to look at him directly. Above the old man's head, there was a faint golden halo. Li Xianqing immediately bowed deeply when he saw the old man. Master! The old man looked at Li Xianqing and scolded coldly. You actually had your body destroyed by someone. How embarrassing! At this moment, the woman in the plain dress suddenly flicked her sleeve. A ray of sword light suddenly flew out. The old man didn't even have time to react before a ray of sword light pierced through his forehead. In an instant, his body shattered and only his soul remained. Li Xianqing, the old man was dumbfounded. His body was gone? At the side, the Supreme Law glanced at the woman in the plain dress, and deep fear flashed across his eyes. Because even she couldn't withstand that sword strike just now. Opposite the woman in the plain dress, the old man was still in a dumbfounded state. He looked at the woman in the plain dress blankly. How is this possible? The woman in the plain dress turned to look at Li Xianqing. Is there anyone else? Li Xianqing stared fixedly at the woman in the plain dress and didn't speak. At this moment, the fear in his heart couldn't be described with any words. His master was a half-step little saint. A half-step little saint. An existence of this level had already come into contact with the current universe. In the ancestral hall of the Yi clan in Green City. Ancestors, Yixian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment on, Yixian's position as crown prince will be removed and Yi Lang will succeed him. The person who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a somewhat timid voice suddenly resounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone looked over and saw a little girl standing at the door. The little girl was about 12 or 13 years old. Her little hands were tightly holding the corners of her skirt, and her face was sickly pale. She looked a little weak, and there was a trace of timidity in her eyes. The little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed slightly to everyone in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Grand Elder, my brother, Yi Xian, is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Grand Elder glanced coldly at Yi Ling. This is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Yi Ling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the Grand Elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders and said, Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan, and it is unknown whether he is dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The Grand Elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new crown prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Grand Elder coldly replied, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now, he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince, Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, young master Yi Lang inherits the title of crown prince. It's everyone's wish. What are you shouting about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded. Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry. She just held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard quickly bowed. This subordinate, Zhang Mu, greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I need 10 personal guards. You can be my personal guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince. I'm willing to die 1,000 deaths. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting long robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Within the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes. His face was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt dizzy and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the hall as she asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. This is truly unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether he's crippled or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you shouting for? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yi Lang nodded, You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 guards. From now on, you'll be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. I'll go through fire and water for the prince, and I'll do anything for you. Yi Lang nodded, Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, and before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man. As he spoke, he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Chapter 1765. The supreme law was a little strange. This guy, she did not dare to be careless and nodded. Young Master Yi, That small grotto heaven is not simple. Don't be careless. She actually wanted to destroy the small grotto heaven, not only to form a good relationship with Yi Xian and his sister, but also because the small grotto heaven made her very unhappy. However, she would not do it, because she still remembered what the woman in the plain dress had said just now. That was, the woman in the plain dress wanted Yi Xian to deal with it himself. It was obvious that she wanted the small grotto heaven for Yi Xian to practice. As if thinking of something, the Supreme Law suddenly asked, "Young Master Yi, that senior just now is?" Yi Xian smiled. "My sister." The Supreme Law looked at Yi Xian. "Sister?" Yi Xian nodded. The Supreme Law remained silent, but his expression grew more and more solemn. After a while, the Supreme Law said, "Young Master Yi, take care." After saying that, she turned and left. Today was a very meaningful day for her. Most of the time, it was not a bad thing to recognize one's own insignificance. After the Supreme Law left, Yi Xian looked at the sword in his hand, the corner of his mouth slightly raised. The sword in his hand was way too awesome. Mortal severing realm? He could really kill with one sword. Never mind a mortal severing realm, he could even kill a regular space-time realm powerhouse. And now, he actually had a chance to reach the mortal severing realm, but he still wanted to cultivate to the Heaven Ascension realm first. He wanted to cultivate to the limitless realm. Steady and steady. After a while, Yi Xian sheathed his sword, turned and left. In another part of the starry sky, the three demon kings suddenly stopped in their tracks. Beside her, Yumu asked, "What's wrong?" The three demon kings looked at the end of the starry sky in the distance. "Li Shenqing is gone. Dead." Yumu's face instantly darkened. "That woman killed Li Shenqing." The three demon kings said softly, "She is much stronger than we thought. She should have surpassed space-time realm." Yumu looked at the three demon kings. "What should we do now?" After a moment of silence, the third goblin king said, "Return to the Sky Goblin Kingdom." With that, he turned around and left. The Sky Demon Kingdom would never be able to take revenge for this. His intuition told him that if he chose to take revenge, more people would die. She looked at the depths of the starry sky with Mu for a moment, then turned around and left. Yi Xian returned to the All-Heaven City. At this moment, Jian Mu and the other three were in secluded meditation. They were all trying to break through to the mortal severing tier. In the Sword League's main hall, Yi Xian looked at the sword maniac in front of him. "Sister Nian and the others have left?" Sword maniac nodded. "They left after coming out of seclusion." Yi Xian asked, "Do you know where he went?" The sword maniac shook his head. "I don't know." Yi Xian felt a little helpless. Sister Nian and Tu were really too much. They didn't even bid farewell to him before leaving. Sword maniac glanced at Yi Xian. "You seem to have become stronger." Yi Xian smiled. "Didn't you also reach the Heaven Ascension realm?" The current sword maniac was in the Heaven Ascension realm. Moreover, his aura was vigorous, absolutely not something an ordinary Heaven Ascension realm could compare to. After a moment of silence, Sword Maniac said, "What do you plan to do next?" Yi Xian smiled. "To the Ancient Realm." Sword Maniac frowned slightly. "Ancient Realm?" Yi Xian asked, "You know about it?" Sword Maniac nodded. "Sword Ju and the others have been there before." Yi Xian smiled. "Do you know about that place?" Qingqing, Yi Clan, Ancestral Shrine. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment on, Yi Xian's position as the Crown Prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile hanging on the corner of the youth's mouth. This person was Yi Lang. And on both sides were the Yi clan's elders. But just then, a somewhat timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone looked over to see a little girl standing at the door. The little girl was about 12 or 13 years old, her two little hands tightly gripping the corner of her skirt. Her face was sickly pale, looking a little weak, and there was a trace of timidity in her eyes. The little girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed slightly to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The great elder coldly glanced at Yi Ling. This is a family matter, what are you interrupting for? Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the great elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan Hill. He's fighting for the clan, and his life is uncertain. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new crown prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning. The great elder coldly replied, Then flog 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince, Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of crown prince, and it's everyone's wish. What are you shouting for? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. This subordinate, Zhang Mu, greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded, You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I'll need 10 personal guards. From now on, you'll be my personal guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate will go through fire and water for the crown prince, and I won't hesitate to die 10,000 times. Yi Lang nodded, Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall, do not hold back. Understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting long robe, and his robe was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Within the ancestral hall, all the elders began to frown. The great elder's eyes narrowed, and his expression was frighteningly dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his expression turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his expression changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, and before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Ling did not stop there, and he charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's expression turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man. As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be removed, and Yi Lang shall take over. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. Beside him were the Yi clan elders. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the hall as she asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for?" Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. This is truly unfair. Impudent." The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. But she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate, Zhang Mu, greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. "This subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince, and I'll do anything for you." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man wore a tight-fitting robe that was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder squinted his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and he charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared. Yixian, he's my man, how dare you? Yixian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yixian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me." Yixian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yixian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yixian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yixian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Chapter 1766. Invincible. The black-clothed men and the others looked at each other. This Heaven Ascension stage guy actually said he was invincible? At this time, the black-clothed man in the lead suddenly said, "Don't be careless, this person is not simple." As he spoke, he looked at Yixian. "Yixian, you're only at the Heaven Ascension stage, you can't protect the divine level spring of eternal life. If you're smart, you'd better." At this time, a sword suddenly pierced through his forehead. The voice of the black-clothed man in the lead came to an abrupt stop. Instant kill. The black-clothed men in the field were all dumbfounded. Instant kill? Yixian himself was also dumbfounded. He had actually instantly killed this guy? This was the mortal severing stage. Moreover, he had just casually struck out with his sword. He had not used the single sword to determine life and death or the sword-drawing technique. And it was such a casual strike that had instantly killed a mortal severing stage expert. Was this the terror of the green profound sword? In the instant that the green profound sword pierced through the black-clothed man's forehead, it began to madly absorb his soul. In the blink of an eye, the green profound sword had completely absorbed his soul. And the other black-clothed men were already somewhat panicking. Instant kill. Their boss had actually been instantly killed. What was there left to do? The others immediately fled. And at this time, a thought flashed through their minds. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. In an instant, more than 10 bloody heads directly flew out. All of them flew out at the same time. After those heads flew out, the green profound sword suddenly appeared in front of Yixian. Looking at the green profound sword in front of him, Yixian's expression became unprecedentedly serious. He had still underestimated the terror of the green profound sword. Without the obstruction of space and time, the speed of the green profound sword was too terrifying. Not to mention the mortal severing stage, even some space-time experts could not stop it. After a long silence, Yixian reached out and grasped the green profound sword. At this moment he had a feeling. Invincible. This was invincible. Holding this sword, he suddenly felt that even a space-time realm expert was like an ant. Thinking to this point, Yixian suddenly frowned. He suddenly felt that it might not be a good thing for him to keep holding onto this sword, because this was the strength of the sword, not his own strength. He had to be clear about this. Otherwise, he might be lost in the power of this sword. Of course, he wouldn't give up on this sword because of this. What a joke! This was something Qinger had specially made for him. As long as he could maintain his original heart and recognize himself, it would be fine. After a short moment, Yixian put the green profound sword away, and then he transformed into a ray of light that vanished into the distance. To the ancient realm. The ancient realm. The ancient world was located in the ancient god star field. This was a very, very ancient star field. Not only did this star field have a long history, but it also had a very powerful martial arts civilization. This place was also known as the center of the universe. Many martial artists even treated this place as the starting point of the martial arts civilization in the universe. The entire ancient god star area was very prosperous, and the forces were very complicated. At the entrance of the ancient god star area, an old man in a gray robe kept sizing up the people entering the ancient god star area in the distance. The old man in the gray robe was a little hunched, and he looked a little thin, but his eyes were very lively. Beside the old man in the gray robe was a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man glanced at the people going in and out of the place in the distance, and smiled. "Oldly, you've been looking for so long, haven't you seen anyone suitable? Green City, Yi Family, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as the crown prince is removed, and Yi Lang will succeed him." The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the elders of the Yi family. But at this time, a timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's sister. When she heard that the family wanted to remove Yi Xian, she ignored her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a family matter, why are you interrupting?" Yi Ling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the great elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li family over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is dead or alive. Yet, the family is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent." The great elders suddenly raged. "Whether he is crippled or not, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new crown prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder coldly replied, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 guards of the Yi residence rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the family for so many years, and even now he is fighting for the family. The family is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince, Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the crown prince's position, and it is everyone's wish. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry, and only clutched her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "This subordinate, Zhang Mu, greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You are very good. After I become the crown prince, I will need 10 personal guards. From now on, you will be my personal guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. "This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince, and I am willing to die 10,000 times." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting long robe, and his robe was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Within the ancestral hall, all the elders began to frown. The great elder's eyes narrowed, and his expression was frighteningly dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his expression turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his expression changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, and before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop, and he rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's expression turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's entire face was a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the hall and asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for?" Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." Impudent! The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether or not he's crippled, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry, and only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 guards. From now on, you'll be my guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. "I'll go through fire and water for the prince, and I'll do anything for you." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang, and just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and he charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me." Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping! Chapter 1767. At this moment, Old Li was convinced that Yi Xian was the young king of Sky Demon Kingdom. He had a deity-level spring of immortality with him. That was a deity-level spring of immortality. Only Sky Demon Kingdom and Ancient God World's top forces could have it, because the deity-level spring of immortality was in the hands of these super forces. Old Li's respect for Yi Xian grew. This was the real young king of Sky Demon Kingdom. I must serve him well. The two continued forward. On the way, Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Old Li, tell me about this ancient world. You know that Sky Demon Kingdom is very far away from here. Therefore, I don't know much about the forces in this place." Old Li quickly nodded. "Young Master Yi, there are many forces in this ancient world and it's very complicated. This is because some forces from the outside world often come here. However, it's actually very difficult for them to survive here because this place is very xenophobic." Yi Xian nodded. "Which force is the strongest?" Old Li said, "There are two strongest. The first is the Great Spiritual Palace. The Great Spiritual Palace is located in the Ancient God City. The Ancient God City is their subsidiary city and there is a great saint in the Great Spiritual Palace." "Great Sage." Yi Xian nodded. "What about the other one?" Old Li said, "The other one is War Pavilion. They are located on War God Mountain in the north of Ancient God Star Field. It's very far from here. Although they are also from Ancient God Star Field, they will not come to Ancient God City because this is Great Spiritual Palace's territory." He paused for a moment before continuing, "The Battle Pavilion is a group of very, very scary people." Yi Xian said with a smile, "How so?" Old Li said, "The War Pavilion advocates fighting and they especially like to stir up trouble. They are the kind that will fight if there's a disagreement." He looked at Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, if you meet people from the War Pavilion, you must be careful. Don't provoke them." At this point, he suddenly stopped. This was the young king of Sky Demon Kingdom. The Sky Demon Empire was no weaker than the Battle Pavilion. Elder Li bowed slightly. "Young Master Yi, the Sky Demon Nation is definitely not afraid of the Battle Pavilion. However, the people from the Battle Pavilion are not easy to deal with. "Young master, you have to be careful if you encounter them." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Thank you for the reminder." As they spoke, they arrived at the ancient god city. When he arrived at the ancient god city, Yi Xian was shocked. The entire ancient god city stood in the starry sky like a giant beast in deep slumber. Standing in front of the city gate, one could not help but feel minuscule. 3,000 meters above ancient god city, there was a statue of a middle-aged man that was 3,000 meters tall. The middle-aged man was dressed in a white robe. His right hand was behind his back, and his eyes were cold as he looked ahead. It was as if the world was nothing but an ant to him. Yi Xian glanced at the statue. "This is..." Old Li laughed and said, "Gu Qingzhen." It is said that he is the first expert who has surpassed the sage realm in the ancient god star region. "God," Yi Xian said softly, "did they become saints or gods by themselves or by others?" Old Li smiled embarrassedly, "I don't know about that." Yi Xian nodded and said, "Let's enter the city." As they spoke, the two of them arrived before the city gate, and there stood a man in armor. Old Li hurriedly walked over to the man in armor, and then he took out 20 eternal life saint crystals and offered them to the man. The man in armor nodded slightly, and then he gestured for them to enter the city. After Old Li led Yi Xian into the city, Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "This great spiritual god palace must be very rich." Old Li said, "Not just ordinarily rich." Yi Xian smiled and glanced at the surroundings. Needless to say, this ancient god city was really prosperous, and there were many experts. Although Heaven Ascension Realm experts weren't as common as dogs, there were still quite a number of them. Among the 10 people, at least 2 or 3 were Heaven Ascension Realm experts. At that time, void rank experts were everywhere like dogs. As expected of the city center of the current universe. Shouldn't I keep a low profile? Meanwhile, Old Li suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, where are you going now?" Yi Xian was about to speak when the sound of fighting suddenly resounded from afar. "Fighting?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. "You can fight here?" Old Li smiled and said, "Normally, it's not allowed. However, the higher-ups usually don't care. Of course, the precondition is that it doesn't cause too much of a commotion. Moreover, many people would enter the river of time as they fight. There aren't many people who dare to cause trouble in the city." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Let's go take a look." As he spoke, he walked towards the distance. Old Li hurriedly followed him. In next to no time, Yi Xian arrived before a luxurious shop, and a woman was in confrontation with a few men before the luxurious shop. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw the woman. "What the fuck? I actually encountered someone I know here." Old Li, who stood by Yi Xian's side, glanced at the luxurious shop and said, "The Divine Armament Pavilion. This young lady has probably been tricked." Yi Xian gazed at Old Li. "What do you mean?" Old Li shook his head. "This young lady has just arrived in ancient God Galaxy, and people like her are like fat lambs to these profiteers. Moreover, she's so beautiful. She's probably finished. The Divine Armament Pavilion has an extraordinary background." Yi Xian gazed at the woman. Even though she was surrounded by a few people, her expression was calm and didn't show even a trace of nervousness. Yi Xian smiled, but he had no intention of attacking. He crossed his arms and was prepared to watch the show. An old man stared fixedly at the woman. "Miss, you broke a divine artifact of my Divine Armament Pavilion. Aren't you going to give us an explanation?" The woman smiled. "How interesting. If it really was a divine artifact, then would it have been broken?" The old man's expression was calm. "No matter what, you must give my Divine Armament Pavilion an explanation today." The woman smirked. "Are you sure you want to blackmail me? Let me tell you, my background isn't simple." The old man looked at the woman. "Is that so?" As he spoke, he waved his right hand, and 3 mortal severing realm elites appeared behind the woman. The woman suddenly looked at Yi Xian. "Are you just going to watch me get bullied?" Yi Xian was speechless. So she had found out about him. Yi Xian walked up to the woman and smiled. "I didn't expect to see you here." The woman in front of him was none other than Daoist. Daoist. Yi Xian didn't expect to see her here. Daoist looked at Yi Xian. If I said I'm here for you, would you believe me? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't. Daoist smiled and was about to speak when the old man suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Are you trying to stand up for me? Yi Xian looked at the old man and smiled. I'm a reasonable person. You said my friend broke a divine artifact of your divine armament pavilion. May I know what divine artifact she broke? The old man said indifferently, What? You want compensation? Yi Xian said seriously, Of course. Isn't it only right and proper to compensate for the damage? The old man looked at Yi Xian and opened his palm. In his hand was a pile of fragments that looked like a vase. The old man said, This is an ancient divine vase, worth 100,000 eternal saint crystals. Since you're so polite, I'll give you a discount. 90,000 eternal saint crystals will do. 90,000 eternal saint crystals. Hearing this, some people shook their heads. That thing isn't even worth a single eternal saint crystal. It's clearly extortion. However, no one said anything because Yi Xian and Daoist were obviously from the outside world. Yi Xian glanced at the ancient divine vase and spoke seriously, It really is a treasure. As he spoke, he turned around to look at Daoist. You actually broke such a precious treasure. How careless of you. Daoist blinked. Then what should we do? Yi Xian turned around to look at the old man. I think 90,000 eternal saint crystals is too little. How about I give you something to make up for it? The old man gazed at Yi Xian. What is it? Yi Xian opened his palm, and spirit beginning appeared on his arm. A divine rank eternal life spring. Someone exclaimed in surprise. It didn't take long for the expressions of everyone here to change. A divine rank eternal life spring. This young man actually has a divine rank eternal life spring with him. Everyone gazed at Yi Xian with terror. Where'd this great figure come from? Meanwhile, the expression of the old man who stood before Yi Xian had instantly changed. He's carrying a divine rank eternal life spring with him. Was this King crazy? Yi Xian gazed at the old man and smiled. Here, I'll make up for it. As he spoke, he passed spirit beginning over. The old man's expression changed drastically. He hesitated for a moment before he bowed slightly. Young master, this is a misunderstanding. A huge misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Yi Xian blinked. What misunderstanding? My friend broke that divine vase of yours, so we should compensate him. If you think this divine rank eternal life spring isn't enough, then it's fine. I'll ask my family to send a few more over right away. Ask my family to send a few more. All the spectators gasped. The divine weapon pavilion is doomed. What kind of god did we offend? The old man who stood before Yi Xian turned pale, and he hurriedly bowed respectfully and spoke with a trembling voice. Young master, this really is a misunderstanding, a huge misunderstanding. Yi Xian smiled. What? Do you think one divine rank eternal life spring isn't enough? If it isn't, then I'll ask my family to send a few more over right now. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and a transmission talisman appeared in his hand. The old man was horrified when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly bowed deeply. Young master, this is a misunderstanding, and it's my divine weapon pavilion's fault for offending your friend. Please be magnanimous and don't make a fuss about it with us. Yi Xian's smile gradually turned cold. Make a fuss about it? What are you talking about? My friend broke something of yours, so I paid for it, yet you're saying that I'm making a fuss about it? The old man was on the verge of tears when he heard this. What sort of person is he? Yi Xian gazed at the old man. Here, take it. The old man hurriedly shook his head. No, I wouldn't dare. Yi Xian suddenly spoke angrily. What? Are you looking down on me and my Sky Demon Kingdom? Sky Demon Kingdom. The old man slumped to the ground when he heard this, and his face was completely devoid of blood. Chapter 1768. The Sky Demon Empire. Everyone was struck dumb when they had heard what Yi Xian had said. It's the Sky Demon Empire. What sort of existence is the Sky Demon Empire? It's an extraordinary power that's comparable to the great spiritual god's palace. Many people in the surroundings revealed pity in their eyes as they gazed at the old man who stood before Yi Xian. The divine armament pavilion is truly finished after offending the Sky Demon Empire. Suddenly, a woman appeared in front of Yi Xian. She wore a violet dress, and she had picturesque features. She was very beautiful. She glanced at Yi Xian, and then she bowed slightly. "Young master, I'm the person in charge of the divine armament pavilion, Little Ru. Everything that happened just now was because of my divine armament." "Shut up." Yi Xian suddenly interrupted her, and then he gazed at her. "Did I allow you to speak?" The woman was speechless. Yi Xian took the pile of fragments from the old man's hand and smiled. "This is a divine bottle from the ancient times." "It's from the ancient times?" As he spoke, he gazed at the old man. "What? Do you really think that one divine rank spring of eternal life isn't enough?" The old man's face was pale as a sheet, and he turned around to look at Little Ru. Little Ru hesitated for a moment before she said, "Young master, this is a misunderstanding." Yi Xian gazed at her and smiled. "Is it a misunderstanding just because you say so?" Little Ru hesitated for a moment before she said, "Young master, we're willing to compensate you for your losses." Yi Xian blinked. "Shouldn't I be the one to compensate you?" Little Ru hurriedly shook her head. "We should be the ones to compensate you." Yi Xian smiled. "Do I look like someone who needs money?" Little Ru was speechless. Yi Xian suddenly smiled. "The divine armament pavilion can cease to exist." As soon as he finished speaking, the transmission talisman in his hands started to tremble. Little Ru's expression changed drastically, and she hurriedly said, "Young master, this is just a misunderstanding." At this time, a black-robed elder suddenly appeared behind Yi Xian. The elder suddenly flicked his finger and a storage ring fell in front of Yi Xian. "Young master, this is a small gift from my divine weapon pavilion. Please accept it." Yi Xian took a look at the storage ring. There were 10 million eternal holy crystals in the ring. 10 million. How generous. Yi Xian withdrew his gaze and said with a smile, "Do you think I'm a beggar?" Black costume old man quickly said, "Young master, my divine weapon pavilion has a few divine items. I wonder if young master is interested." Saying this, he took out another storage ring and placed it in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian took a glance inside the storage ring. There was a black armor, a long sword, and a pair of gloves. One look and you could tell that it was no ordinary creature. Yi Xian passed the ring to Daoist. "Take a look." Daoist took a look, and then looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "Do you like it?" Daoist smiled. "What if I don't?" Yi Xian said, "Then I'll destroy the divine weapon pavilion." Destroy the divine weapon pavilion. Black costume old man's eyelids twitched when he heard Yi Xian's words, and his expression changed subtly. Daoist looked at the storage ring for a long time, and then she smiled. "I like it." With that, she put the storage ring away. Black costume old man and the others heaved a sigh of relief when they saw this. Yi Xian smiled. "It's good that you like it." With that, he turned to look at black costume old man. "Thank you." Black costume old man hurriedly said, "You're welcome, young master." Yi Xian smiled and then he took Daoist's hand and left. Daoist instinctively tried to struggle free, but Yi Xian's grip was very tight and she couldn't struggle at all. Daoist glanced at Yi Xian and didn't resist. It didn't take long for Yi Xian's group of 3 to vanish nearby. Meanwhile, black costume old man heaved a heavy sigh of relief. At this moment, his palms were covered in sweat. Little Ru spoke in a low voice. "Elder, is he really from the Sky Demon Kingdom?" Black costume old man gazed into the distance and spoke softly. "That isn't important. What's important is that he's absolutely not someone we can afford to offend." Little Ru nodded, and then she hesitated for a moment before she said, "But I don't think he's from the Sky Demon Kingdom. Because he's a human." The black costume old man suddenly interrupted Little Ru. "Don't worry about whether he's from the Sky Demon Kingdom or not. Because that isn't important. What's important is that we can't afford to offend him. Understand?" His tone had become quite fierce. Little Ru nodded and didn't dare to speak again. A person who carried a divine-level spring of immortality with him was definitely not someone the divine weapon pavilion could afford to offend. Black costume old man suddenly turned to look at the old man who was still sitting on the ground. Go out and train before coming back. Having said that, he turned and left. On the ground, the old man smiled bitterly. He knew that he would never be able to return to the ancient God Star region. However, to him, this was already the best outcome. At least he could live. In the distance, Yi Xian held Dao Yi's hand and slowly walked towards the end of the street. Dao Yi said nothing, nor did he try to break free from Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian turned to look at Dao Yi and smiled. I think we're still friends. What do you think? Dao Yi did not say anything. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Don't be like that. Even if I'm not God Yi, we've been together for a while. I think we still have feelings for each other. What do you think? Dao Yi looked at Yi Xian. After a while, she said with a smile, Of course. Yi Xian asked softly, Do you mean it? Dao Yi nodded. In fact, she did have feelings for Yi Xian. In fact, she could not bring herself to hate Yi Xian. Yi Xian let go of Dao Yi's hand and smiled. Dao Yi, I hope your universal laws are fine. Really? Dao Yi nodded. I know. Yi Xian said with a smile, All right. Let's not talk about these unhappy things. By the way, why did you come to the ancient God Star region this time? Dao Yi said, I want to join the great spiritual God palace. Yi Xian asked, Why? Dao Yi smiled. I want to learn the laws of the great spiritual God palace. They have the supreme laws of this universe. The supreme laws. He thought of that woman from back then, the supreme law of nature. That was the real supreme law. And it was the real deal. Unfortunately, he did not ask for her contact information. Otherwise, he could have recommended Dao Yi to learn from her. What a pity. At that moment, Dao Yi suddenly asked, What about you? Yi Xian said with a smile, I just want to wander around and see the strong people in this universe. Dao Yi's expression was a little complicated. I haven't seen you for a long time and I can't see through you now. Although Yi Xian was in the heaven ascension state, he gave her a very dangerous feeling. Yi Xian smiled. Haven't you reached the heaven ascension state? Actually, I'm a little curious. How did you reach the heaven ascension state? Dao Yi blinked. I'm not telling you. Yi Xian was speechless. At that moment, old Li, who was behind Yi Xian, suddenly said, Young Master Yi, there are some mysterious auras around us. Yi Xian glanced around and said with a smile, I know. They must be here for the divine level spring of eternal life. Old Li's eyes flashed with a cold light. They even dare to covet the Sky Demon Kingdom. They really don't know what's good for them. Yi Xian said with a smile, Let them be. As he spoke, he looked at Dao Yi. I'll accompany you to the great spiritual God palace. Dao Yi hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Okay. Yi Xian turned to Old Li and quickly said, I'll lead the way. Under Old Li's lead, the three went straight to the great spiritual God palace. Along the way, Yi Xian discovered that more and more people were secretly watching him. Clearly, the temptation of the divine level spring of eternal life was too great, so great that many people would take the risk. Dao Yi looked around and a trace of worry flashed in his eyes. Aren't you afraid? Yi Xian laughed. What's there to be afraid of? Life and death are nothing. If you're not satisfied, then fight. Dao Yi looked at Yi Xian. You're a little arrogant now. Yi Xian. Dao Yi was about to speak when the three of them suddenly stopped. There was no one around them at some point in time. Yi Xian smiled. Looks like they're going to make a move. At that moment, a young man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The young man wore a brocade robe and held a folding fan in his hand. He looked elegant and very handsome. The young man looked at Yi Xian and smiled. You're so calm. Yi Xian blinked. Aren't you afraid of my Sky Demon Kingdom? The young man smiled. You're not from Sky Demon Kingdom. Yi Xian smiled. Why do you think so? The young man looked at Yi Xian. Sky Demon Kingdom is mostly made up of demonic beasts. Although there are humans, there are very few of them. Also, if you're really from Sky Demon Kingdom, you wouldn't be so unfamiliar with Ancient God Galaxy. It's obvious that this is your first time here. Hearing the young man's words, Mr. Li hesitated for a moment and then looked at Yi Xian. He was a little suspicious. In fact, he was suspicious from the start. The geniuses of Sky Demon Kingdom wouldn't be unfamiliar with Ancient God Galaxy. And it was Yi Xian's first time here. However, because Yi Xian had the divine level spring of eternal life, his doubts were dispelled. Yi Xian smiled. "Is that why you dare to make a move?" The young man smiled. "You claim to be the young lord of Sky Demon Kingdom. But as far as I know, the young lord of Sky Demon Kingdom isn't human and he's not a man." As he spoke, his smile turned cold. "You dare to pretend to be the young lord of Sky Demon Kingdom? You've got guts." Yi Xian smiled. "You've said so much because you want to know my real identity, right?" The young man looked at Yi Xian without a word. Yi Xian shook his head. "Actually, no matter who I am, you're already prepared to make a move. After all, I'm only at Heaven Ascension state. Also, you must have investigated and know that I don't have a mysterious expert with me. Am I right?" The young man looked at Yi Xian for a moment and smiled. Yi Xian opened his palm and Ling Chu appeared on his arm. He looked at the young man and smiled. "This is the divine level spring of eternal life. Hurry up and do it. As long as you kill me, you can obtain the divine level spring of eternal life. Come on. I'm ready." The young man went silent for a moment before he said, "Can you not be so arrogant? We are the robbers. It's like you're robbing us." Yi Xian was speechless. "P.S. I haven't been updating well recently, so I'm not asking for votes anymore. I know myself very well." Chapter 1769. It had to be said that the young man was a little hesitant at this moment. Damn it. What right does this guy have to be so arrogant? What right does he have? This is not normal. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. "Brother, can you be a little more decisive when robbing?" The young man hesitated, then said, "Brother, do you have some trump card? If you do, can you reveal a little in advance? If it's strong, we'll turn enemies into friends. What do you think?" Yi Xian gave him a thumbs up. "You're really shameless." The young man smiled awkwardly. "I have to be careful in a small business." Yi Xian sized up the young man. "You're at the mortal severing realm?" The young man nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian sized up the young man, then said, "You should have a lot of treasures on you." Hearing this, the young man's eyelids twitched, and he looked at Yi Xian with a hint of wariness in his eyes. "This guy wants to rob me instead?" At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the young man's right. "Why are you talking nonsense with him? Kill him first." As he spoke, a burly man suddenly walked out, and the burly man charged directly at Yi Xian. However, he was stopped by the young man. The burly man turned to look at the young man. "What are you doing?" The young man looked at Yi Xian. "We don't want this divine level spring of eternal life anymore." The burly man was taken aback, then said, "Why?" The young man directly slapped the burly man's head and said angrily, "Ask your ass. Are you the boss or am I the boss?" The burly man hesitated, then said, "You're the boss." The young man turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "I haven't exposed my background yet. Why did you stop?" The young man smiled. "Brother, although you're only at the Heaven Ascension realm, your aura is thick. I'm afraid that ordinary mortal severing realm experts are not your opponent. Brother, farewell." With that, he turned to leave. Wait. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly spoke. The young man stopped and turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Since you don't want to rob me, then I'll rob you. Hand over everything." At this moment, the burly man suddenly pointed at Yi Xian angrily. "Gigolo, don't be so arrogant. Do you dare to take my hammer strike?" "Gigolo?" Yi Xian frowned and turned to look at Daoist. "Am I very fair?" Daoist sized up Yi Xian and said with a smile, "Quite handsome." Yi Xian blinked. "I think so too." Daoist shook his head. "You're getting more and more shameless." Yi Xian was about to speak when the burly man suddenly said angrily, "You two are openly flirting. Do you think we brothers don't exist?" As he spoke, he suddenly leaped up. Then, he gripped a giant hammer and slammed it down at Yi Xian's head. Peak of the mortal severing realm. Moreover, his aura was fierce. One look and it was obvious that he was in the mortal severing realm. Yi Xian suddenly raised his hand and swung his sword. It was just an ordinary sword strike. Boom! With this strike, the burly man was directly sent back to his original spot, and the giant hammer in his hand was directly split into countless pieces. Seeing this scene, the young man's eyes suddenly narrowed. Swordsman. The burly man looked at Yi Xian, a little shocked. You're a swordsman. Swordsmen was the worst group of people to provoke. Not only did they like to fight, but they also had a bad temper. Yi Xian laughed. I'm a swordsman. The young man took a long look at Yi Xian. Denyo, you retreat first. The burly man hurriedly shook his head. Retreat my ass. Do you think I, Denyo, would abandon my brothers? If you don't leave, then I won't leave. The young man said, then you stay and stop him. Believe. Denyo turned to look at the young man with an astonished expression. Big brother, are you serious? The young man spoke indifferently. What do you think? Denyo hesitated for a moment, and then he said, Big brother, you stay. Don't worry, I'll take good care of sister-in-law. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and ran. The young man's face darkened. Yi Xian looked at the young man and smiled. There's definitely more than two of you, right? The young man smiled. Sir, there's more than two of us. However, we regret it now. Sir, can we stop now? Yi Xian smiled. I'm curious. Why did you suddenly give up? The young man looked at Yi Xian. I can't defeat you. Yi Xian frowned. We haven't fought yet. The young man shook his head. Your strength has exceeded my expectations. Even if we can kill you, we'll have to pay a terrible price. I don't want to pay that price. So, I choose to give up. Yi Xian said with a smile, Just go. The young man glanced at Yi Xian and cupped his fists. Thank you. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly stopped and said, Be careful. Although we've given up, there's a group of people who won't give up. However, there is a group of people who will never give up. They have their eyes on you. Yi Xian smiled. Thank you. The young man looked at Yi Xian. Aren't you going to ask which group I'm from? Yi Xian gently flicked his sleeve. Under the Saint Realm, I'm invincible. Above the Saint Realm, 1 for 1. The young man looked at Yi Xian. After a long while, he said, You're bragging. If you're not at the Heaven Ascension stage, I'll believe you. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned and disappeared at the end of the street. Yi Xian glanced at the end of the street in the distance, then turned to look at Daoist. Let's go. I'll send you to the great spiritual god palace. Daoist nodded. The two continued forward. Old Li hesitated for a moment, then hurriedly followed. After Yi Xian and the other two disappeared at the end of the street, the young man and the burly man appeared again. Beside them was a black-robed woman. The burly man said in a low voice, Boss, that's the divine level spring of eternal life. The young man said softly, Life is more important. The burly man looked at the young man. What does Big Brother mean? The young man's eyes flashed with a trace of seriousness. That sword strike was just a casual strike, the very casual kind. As he spoke, he slowly clenched his right hand. He hid his strength. If we fight, we might win, but it will be a Pyrrhic victory. The price is too high. Moreover, this person dared to pretend to be the young lord of Sky Demon Kingdom. What does this mean? It means he's not afraid of Sky Demon Kingdom at all. This person's background is not simple. The burly man said in a low voice, What a pity. The young man smiled. It's a pity indeed. I almost couldn't help but want to fight just now. But staying alive is more important. He also wanted to take a gamble. As long as he obtained a divine level spring of eternal life, not only would his brother's fates change, but the fates of their loved ones would also be changed. A divine-level spring of eternal life. It was too tempting. However, he still endured it. When facing Yixian, his intuition told him that he couldn't beat this young man. And he chose to believe in his intuition. At this moment, the black-robed woman suddenly said, "They're going to fight." The young man looked into the distance and smiled. "Come, let's see if my choice is wrong." Far away, at the end of the street, Daoist suddenly said, "How did you get this divine-level spring of eternal life?" Yixian smiled. "My friend gave it to me." Daoist looked at Yixian. "How did your friend get this divine-level spring of eternal life?" Yixian said, "My dad helped." Daoist, at this moment, Old Li suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, we're about to reach the great spiritual palace. As long as we cross the street in front, we'll enter a martial arts prohibited zone. At that time, no one will dare to fight us." Martial arts prohibited zone? Yixian frowned. "What's a martial arts prohibited zone?" Old Li quickly explained, "It's a martial arts prohibited zone. This is a rule set by the great spiritual palace. No one is allowed to fight animals in a martial arts prohibited zone. Otherwise, it's equivalent to declaring war on the great spiritual palace." Yixian said with a smile, "It's like a safe zone?" Old Li nodded. Yixian smiled. "Then we'll have to pick up our pace." Old Li nodded. Just as he was about to speak, an old man suddenly appeared before the three of them. Peak of the mortal severing stage. As the old man appeared, over a dozen men in black appeared around Yixian's group. All of them were at the mortal severing stage. The old man looked at Yixian. "Divine level spring of eternal life, you." At this moment, Yixian suddenly took a step forward. As soon as he took a step forward, a sword pierced through the old man's brow. "Pissed!" A jet of blood shot out from the old man's brow. Instant kill. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they witnessed this scene. Instant kill? Daoist was also shocked. Yixian could already instantly kill a mortal severing stage elite? Yixian walked up to the old man and shook his head. "Too weak. I haven't even used any strength." As he spoke, he pulled out the old man's spatial ring. There were millions of eternal holy crystals in the spatial ring. "I'm rich." Yixian chuckled. Yixian turned to look at the men in black. The men in black's expressions changed drastically, and they disappeared on the spot. They escaped. Instant kill a mortal severing stage elite. Is this Heaven Ascension stage? This is probably the space-time stage. Yixian turned to look at Daoist. "Let's go." Daoist glanced at Yixian. "You've become so strong now?" Yixian smiled. "Just so. Daoist, Yixian and the others continued forward. Daoist took another deep look at Yixian. He was extremely shocked. How long had it been since they parted? This guy had already reached this level. How did he cultivate? This was not normal at all. It was too heaven-defying. Just as he was about to step into the forbidden area, Yixian seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly stopped and turned around to look at his surroundings. He called Ling Chu out. "I'm going to step into the forbidden area. It's still not too late if you make a move now." The street was silent. Yixian frowned. "Are you really not going to do anything? This is the divine level spring of eternal life." There was still no response. Yixian said solemnly, "If you guys don't make a move, I'm going in. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Think carefully. If you miss this opportunity, you won't get another one." Old Li looked at Yixian in shock. Yixian suddenly got a little angry. "Hurry up and snatch it. I'm really just at the Heaven Ascension boundary. I have no backing, I'm just one person, come and snatch it." After a moment of silence, a voice suddenly came from the end of the street. "As if we'll believe you." Yixian was speechless. Chapter 1770. I don't believe you. Hearing this, Yixian was speechless. Damn it, these guys are not making a move. Beside Yixian, Daoist rolled his eyes at Yixian. "You." Yixian laughed. Let's go. With that, the three of them walked towards the great spiritual palace. Behind them, the mysterious experts dispersed. In the end, no one dared to make a move. Killing a mortal severing realm expert. Killing a mortal severing realm expert as an ascension state expert was too terrifying. He was definitely not an ordinary person. Although the divine level spring of eternal life was good, life was more important. In the dark, the young man who wanted to snatch Yi Xian suddenly laughed. Looks like my intuition was right. The big man nodded. This person's sword principle is so powerful. The young man said softly, that sword strike of his just now was also very casual. Hearing this, the big man's face turned solemn. The young man said in a low voice, he dares to be so arrogant. Even if he is not from the Sky Demon Kingdom, I'm afraid he is from a super force like the small cave heaven. He is backing and cannot be provoked. Disperse. With that he turned around and left. The big man hesitated and said, what a pity. With that he and the woman in black turned around and left. The Great Spiritual Palace. The Great Spiritual Palace was located in the center of the ancient God City. It was the core of the entire ancient God City and the entire ancient God Galaxy. To the cultivators of the universe, the Great Spiritual Palace was undoubtedly a holy land, because this place had the most advanced martial arts civilization. Not only that, the entire Great Spiritual Palace had 8 divine levels spring of eternal life. Cultivating in the Great Spiritual Palace, one's cultivation speed was at least 10 times faster than others. In other words, there were no weaklings in the Great Spiritual Palace. Therefore, countless people wanted to join the Great Spiritual Palace. So long as they could join the Great Spiritual Palace, it was like ascending to the heavens in a single step. However, the Great Spiritual Palace was extremely strict when it came to accepting people. What they valued was talent. This was talent. As long as you had talent, even if you were an ordinary person, they were willing to accept you. Because they could nurture you. But if you don't have talent, even if you reach the mortal severing tier, they won't want you. Because of this, the Great Spiritual Divine Palace was filled with monstrous geniuses. Not long after, the three of them arrived at the entrance of the Great Spiritual God Palace. At this moment, the entrance was filled with people. The entire Great Spiritual Deity Palace had a total of 10 gates. Each gate was responsible for examining the geniuses who wished to join the Great Spiritual Deity Palace. In any era, talents were very important. Therefore, the Great Spiritual God Palace opened these 10 entrances with the intention of not letting go of any true geniuses and demons. At that moment, Old Li suddenly pointed to the right. Young Master Yi, do you see that table? Yi Xian turned his head to look. Under the city wall, there was a circular platform that was more than 100 feet long and wide. Yi Xian asked, what's that? Old Li said solemnly, that's the ancestral stage. Yi Xian frowned. Ancestral platform? Old Li nodded. It was left behind by the ancestor of the Great Spiritual Divine Palace. Inside it is a strand of his soul. In order to prevent the Great Spiritual Divine Palace from becoming corrupt, he specially left this platform. Anyone who thinks that the Great Spiritual Divine Palace is unfair can step onto this platform and be personally tested by him. Yi Xian said solemnly, the ancestor will personally test you? Old Li nodded. Yes. Yi Xian smiled. Interesting. Old Li continued. However, this ancestral stage is also called the death platform, because anyone who steps onto it without the approval of the ancestor of the Great Spiritual Divine Palace will be killed immediately. Since ancient times, only one person has walked down from this death platform. Yi Xian asked, who? Old Li said solemnly, the current number 1 genius of the Great Spiritual Divine Palace, Li Yaoya. He reached the half-step minor saint before the age of 20. He reached the half-step minor saint before the age of 20. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he heard this. Damn it. His talent seems to be even greater than mine. Old Li continued, it's worth mentioning that Li Yaoya actually didn't need to step onto the death platform because he was directly taken as the personal disciple of the Great Spiritual Divine Palace's master. Yi Xian said with a smile. The reason why he did that was to obtain the approval of the ancestor of the great spiritual divine palace? Old Li nodded. Yes. However, he really took a risk because if he didn't obtain the approval of the ancestor of the great spiritual divine palace, he would be killed immediately. Even the current master of the great spiritual divine palace couldn't save him, but he obtained it. Yi Xian said with a smile, all geniuses are proud. As he spoke, he turned to look at Daoist. Are you confident? Daoist said with a smile, I'll give it a try. Yi Xian nodded. Go ahead. I'll wait for you. Daoist said with a smile, all right. As she spoke, she walked towards a city gate not far away. Old Li glanced at Daoist, wanting to speak but hesitating. Yi Xian suddenly said, You don't think she has a chance? Old Li nodded. It's very difficult. Yi Xian was silent. In fact, he also felt that it was difficult. Daoist wasn't young and she was only in the ascending heaven stage. If she was in a place like the 9 dimensions, she would definitely be a genius, but here, it was definitely not enough. At this time, it was Daoist's turn. Daoist started to talk with an old man. About a quarter of an hour later, the old man handed a token to Dao. The corner of Daoist's mouth curled up. She turned and walked in front of Yi Xian, then waved the token in her hand. Success! Yi Xian was a little curious. How did you do it? Daoist said with a smile. They don't care about the realm. Yi Xian nodded. I know, but they must have asked you something, right? Daoist nodded. I said I want to learn the Tao of law, so he asked me some questions. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, You answered correctly? Daoist said with a smile, Of course. Yi Xian gave a thumbs up. Amazing! He realized that so far, only Daoist had passed the test. Old Li also quickly cupped his fists. Congratulations, young lady. Daoist smiled. Many thanks. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Do you want to try? Yi Xian blinked. Me. Daoist nodded. Want to try? Yi Xian was a little hesitant. Daoist directly pulled his hand and walked away. In fact, she also hoped to join the great spiritual god palace. It was good to have a companion. Yi Xian was pulled by Daoist to a testing door. After a while, it was finally time to discuss Dao with Yi Xian. Yi Xian was pushed in front of an old man by Daoist. The old man glanced at Yi Xian. 23, Heaven Ascension Realm. Yi Xian nodded. The old man said again, Your aura is thick, without any impurities. However, it is still far from enough. At your age, you should be at least mortal severing realm. Directly denied. Yi Xian smiled. Didn't you say you don't care about the realm? The old man glanced at Yi Xian. If you have other strengths, you can show them. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Tao of time. The old man looked at Yi Xian. Understanding of Tao of time? Yi Xian nodded. The old man suddenly became interested. Tell me. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Time and space are inseparable, both. Nonsense. The old man suddenly interrupted Yi Xian. Time and space are inseparable? That is your understanding? Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, But is there a problem? The old man said coldly. Time is time, space is space. Both are independent existences. How dare you say they are inseparable? Ridiculous. Yi Xian frowned. Could it be that Qing Er was wrong? Definitely not. Qing Er's understanding was too forward. Thinking of this, Yi Xian smiled. I was wrong. Goodbye. With that, he turned around and left. He did not really want to join the great spiritual god palace. Therefore, he did not think of defending himself. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly said, Wait. Yi Xian stopped and turned to look at the old man. The old man stared at Yi Xian. Who told you that time and space are inseparable? Yi Xian smiled. My younger sister. The old man frowned. She is misleading us. Space is space and time is time. Both are independent. How is it inseparable? Yi Xian said with a smile, I was wrong. Goodbye. With that, he turned around and left. He felt that there was no need for him to explain, because Qing Er's understanding was too advanced. Not to mention this old man, even the supreme laws were difficult to understand, let alone these people. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly laughed and said, "Wait." Yi Xian stopped and turned around. Not far away, a middle-aged man was walking towards him slowly. The old man hurriedly bowed respectfully when he saw the middle-aged man. "Greetings, Elder Gu Qing." The middle-aged man grinned. "There's no need to be so polite." As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. "I think he's not bad. Let him join me." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone looked at Yi Xian. Their gazes were slightly strange. That's because of his relationship with Qin Shi. He was clearly eliminated, yet he's been recruited. This is shady. Yi Xian glanced at Elder Gu Qing. "Elder, do we know each other?" Gu Qing smiled. "Don't we know each other now?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "I've been eliminated." Gu Qing roared with laughter. "Who said that?" "I'm the outer court elder, and I have the authority to accept anyone. From this moment onward, you're an outer court disciple of my great spiritual god palace." "An outer court disciple?" Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. "Elder Gu, I've been eliminated." Gu Qing gazed at Yi Xian. "Do you think the test of my great spiritual god palace is a joke?" Yi Xian fell silent. Damn it. He smelled a conspiracy. Meanwhile, Gu Qing tossed a wooden token to Yi Xian. "Come with me." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then said, "Do you really want to accept me?" Gu Qing turned to look at Yi Xian. "Do you have a problem with that?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "I'm only at the heaven ascension stage." Gu Qing looked at Yi Xian. "You don't want to join the great spiritual god palace?" Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. Gu Qing said coldly, "Then why did you come to participate in my great spiritual god palace's test?" Yi Xian said, "But I didn't pass." At this moment, the old man at the side suddenly said, "You passed. What you said earlier about space and time being inseparable is completely correct." Yi Xian looked at the old man with a face full of astonishment. "Fuck, are you so unprincipled? P.S. Do you vote whenever you want, or do you habitually vote every day after you finish reading?" You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.